The rain was coming down like it was shot from a fire hose, thick and heavy with chunks of hail slamming into the pavement. We bolted across the empty lot, soaked in seconds, and made it to the old gym just as the wind picked up even worse. The place had been shut down for a couple years. Used to be school fairs and stuff here. But now it was just another abandoned building. No lights, no security. The wide doors creaked when we shoved them open, and the inside was almost pitch black, except for the faint light leaking from the broken windows up high. Sam dug into his backpack and pulled out some energy bars, tossing me one while I checked my phone. Screen was wet but still working. The battery wasn't great though. Around us, the concrete corridor smelled like damp grass and old rubber, the kind you find in playgrounds or under gym mats. Our shoes squeaked on the floor, and every step we took bounced off the walls, making the place sound twice as empty. We started laughing at the echoes, clapping and stomping just to hear the noise bounce back at us. I noticed the kitchen door was wide open at the far end of the hallway. There was a faint beam of light coming through it, shaky like someone was holding a flashlight. I stopped laughing. Sam noticed too, and dropped his energy bar halfway through opening it. In that weak light, a man was standing, barely visible except for the outline. He wore a filthy apron, spattered with something dark, and his arms hung down at his sides like dead weight. His eyes were way too wide, staring straight ahead without blinking. I blurted out, "Sorry, we'll leave right now," even though he hadn't said anything. My voice sounded way too loud in the hollow gym, and for a second, everything went dead silent, except for the tapping of rain against the broken windows high above. The man didn't move, just stood there, like he was waiting for something or someone. He didn't answer. He just gave this slow, stiff nod, like he recognized us from somewhere, like he thought we belonged there. Sam leaned in close and whispered, "Dude, I think he's living here or something. We should just bounce." I nodded without saying anything. Something about the guy's stare made the hair on my arms stand up. We turned to leave, moving fast but trying not to look like we were running. As soon as we passed the base of the stairwell, there was this clanging noise from above us, loud and sharp against the metal railings, almost like someone tapping a knife on a table. It repeated twice, a steady rhythm that made my chest tighten. Sam froze for half a second, then yanked on my jacket sleeve to keep moving. I glanced up and saw two small yellow points near the balcony. Could have been a flashlight, maybe someone else hiding up there. Could have been something worse. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to sound more annoyed than scared. "Don't come down! We're leaving!" No answer. Just the rain hammering the roof and the weird hollow drip of water somewhere deeper inside. Then the smell hit us. Burnt plastic and grease, like an old kitchen fire that never really got cleaned up. It came from the corridor ahead, sharp and sour. Sam covered his nose with his sleeve, gagging a little. We had to pass the kitchen door again to get out, and every step closer made the hair on my neck stand up. I could feel his stare again, hot against the back of my neck, but I didn't look. Sam stayed on my heels, not saying a word. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just watched us. Every instinct in me screamed not to turn around, not to ask what he wanted. We pushed through the main doors, back into the freezing rain. Out in the yard, we tried to laugh it off. The rain was still pouring, but lighter now, bouncing off the pavement and dripping from the edges of our hoods. Sam shook his head and said, "Just a homeless guy looking for food. Forget it." I nodded, forcing a grin. It made sense. The place was abandoned, dry, and out of sight. Probably better than any alley downtown. We jogged the rest of the way home without talking much, our shoes squelching with every step. That night, lying in bed with the windows rattling from the storm, I thought I heard something. A soft whispering noise, almost like someone moving along the side of the building. pausing at each window, testing them. I told myself it was just the wind, or the rain slapping against the gutter. It sounded reasonable enough, and I was half asleep anyway. In the morning, when I opened my front door to grab the newspaper, something slipped out and landed at my feet. It was an old, greasy piece of paper, folded into a tight square. I unfolded it and recognized it instantly. It was a menu from that same cafeteria we'd seen at the gym. There was a thick black circle drawn around one section with a marker. Meals for 2. I stood there for a while, the cold morning air raising goosebumps on my arms. Deep down, something itched at my gut, a feeling I couldn't shrug off. Like we'd been added to someone's dinner plans. I told Sam about it, expecting him to laugh it off. He just stared at me, his face serious for once, and said, "Man, it's probably a dumb prank. Some kid saw us and thought it'd be funny." I agreed out loud, but inside I knew it wasn't a joke. Somebody wanted us to know we weren't done with them yet. A week later, I was walking home from work, hood up, hands deep in my pockets. It was already dark, the streetlights buzzing overhead. I got close to my building and slowed down. There, right by the front steps, stood the same man from the gym. Same dirty apron, same wide, unblinking eyes. He was holding a plastic food container, steam rising from the cracked lid, curling into the cold air. He saw me and his whole face shifted. Not a smile, but something like relief. He took a small step toward me, craning his neck to see past me, like he was searching for Sam too. My mouth was dry, but I managed to say, "We're not hungry, sir." I tried to walk past him, sticking close to the wall. He set the container down on the bench by the entrance. Then, without a word, he reached into the folds of his apron and pulled out a kitchen knife. He started tapping the blade against the handle, a soft metallic rhythm that cut through the quiet evening air. I looked around, heart hammering, but luck was on my side. A couple of people from the neighboring building came out dragging garbage bags, chatting loudly. The man noticed them too. He slipped the knife back into his apron and turned slightly away, like he was just waiting for someone. I didn't waste the chance. I rushed inside, letting the heavy door slam behind me. My hands shook as I punched the number for the local officer on my phone. The patrol car showed up fast. I waited by the security window, trying to explain everything at once. By the time the officer got to the bench, there was no sign of the man. Only the container left behind, still warm, the scent of overcooked onions and meat filling the air. Sam pushed hard for us to file a report. Even if we didn't have real proof he threatened us, we had to get it on record. So we did. The officer was polite but not exactly hopeful. He said without an actual crime, there wasn't much they could do. Afterward, we installed new locks on the apartment doors and changed up our jogging routes, sticking to well-lit streets with plenty of people around. For a while, things felt normal again. But some nights, just when everything's quiet and I'm about to drift off, I hear it. The soft, steady tapping of metal on metal from somewhere out in the courtyard. I sit up, holding my breath, straining to tell if it's real or just my imagination. Some nights it fades. Other nights it keeps going, long enough to make me wonder if I should call the cops again. We never opened the food container, didn't even touch it. Just double-bagged it and tossed it in the dumpster at the edge of town. I still wonder what was inside, but I'm glad we never found out. The teenagers from the next building over claimed they saw the same man a few days later, crawling around the roof of the abandoned gym, fiddling with the air vents like he was trying to find a way in. People kept saying it's nothing to worry about. Maybe he's just cold, they said. Maybe he just needs a place to eat. I don't argue anymore. I just nod. But every time I walk past a kitchen aisle at the store and see a cheap kitchen knife hanging on the rack, I think about how something as normal as dinner can look so much worse when it's sitting in the wrong hands. I only got the shift for a week, just to cover for a sick stock guy. The store was massive, and after closing, they only left the lights on in 2 main aisles. Everything else stayed dark and quiet, except for the low hum of the fridge fan. Every tiny sound felt like it didn't belong. I was moving price tags around, trying to finish before midnight so I could go home and not get stuck in overtime. My hands were sore from peeling off old stickers when I heard it. A sharp clank of a chain behind the goods elevator door. No deliveries were scheduled that night. I stopped moving, holding a tag half peeled, and listened hard. A second later, it sounded like something glass rolled across the concrete floor inside. I told myself it was probably just a jar falling off a shelf. Maybe someone stacked stuff badly and it tipped. I wiped my hands on my jeans and headed toward the elevator to check it out. My sneakers squeaked a little on the floor. The whole way there, I kept thinking I should grab someone from security, but the place was supposed to be locked down tight. Figured it wasn't worth making a fuss over a broken jar. The elevator doors were closed, but one side was a little crooked, like something might have jammed it. I hesitated just a second, then grabbed the edge and slid the door open a crack. Right there, just beyond the gap, stood a man. He was wearing a motorcycle helmet with a mirrored visor, and I couldn't see his face at all. He stood completely still, head slightly tilted, like he was trying to figure out who I was. I stepped back, heart punching against my ribs, but kept my voice steady. I shouted, "Store's closed. You need to leave through the front entrance." There was no answer. Just silence. Then, almost casually, the guy tilted his helmet a little more to the side. It was slow, deliberate, like he was studying me. I didn't wait to see what he'd do. I tightened my grip on the door, ready to slam it shut, but he raised one hand before I could. He threw something at me, a glass jar. It spun through the air and smashed at my feet, spraying sweet corn juice all over the concrete. Glass shards bounced up and clipped my shoes. Instinct kicked in. I spun around and sprinted toward the security hallway, yanking the radio from my belt. I jammed the talk button, barking into it. "Security! Need help! Main floor by elevator!" Static answered me. No voice. No footsteps coming to check. Behind me, another jar whistled through the air and exploded somewhere close, missing my head by inches. I flinched hard and ducked. A price sign wobbled dangerously above me, almost torn off its metal stand. I didn't waste time calling again. I bolted toward the staff exit, one hand pounding the panic button mounted to the wall as I ran. Outside, the siren started blaring, and inside, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the whole store in a sickly red glow. The man in the helmet vanished from sight, like he dissolved between the pallets. I pressed my back against a shelf, trying to breathe quietly, straining my ears for any hint of movement. Somewhere down the aisle between household cleaners and dry goods, I heard the crunch of glass underfoot. He was moving that way. I gripped a long plastic tube from the wrapping station, holding it like some ridiculous spear. The tube was hollow and flimsy, but it felt better than empty hands. Minutes stretched into what felt like forever. Police were supposed to arrive in 5 minutes, but each second dragged like an hour. I crouched lower, staying still, just listening. A glimpse of his helmet flashed out from behind a stack of boxed detergent. He paused when he saw me with the plastic tube, like he was considering something, then ducked back deeper into the section. I tightened my grip and tried not to move, barely breathing. Finally, the siren outside cut off, leaving a heavy silence. That meant the police were inside the building. They entered through the loading dock's vented doors, moving fast and spreading out across the main floor. Over the loudspeaker, I explained where I'd last seen the intruder, my voice shaking more than I wanted. A minute later, sharp shouts broke out from the grocery section. "Get on the ground, now!" The words bounced off the high ceiling and echoed down the aisles. They brought him back through the dairy section, hands cuffed behind his back. He was wearing a leather jacket, head lowered as they marched him toward the loading bay. When an officer lifted off the helmet, I recognized him immediately. It was a former employee, one of the warehouse guys. He'd been fired about a month ago for skipping shifts and causing problems with deliveries. His hair was greasy, his eyes wide and darting around like he still couldn't believe he'd been caught. He kept saying over and over, "I just wanted to talk. You didn't have to freak out. I wasn't going to hurt anybody." One of the officers told me they found 3 more cans hidden inside his jacket pockets, taped up like he meant to throw them if needed. Corn, peaches, and green beans. All heavy, all glass. I signed the report with a hand that wouldn't quite stop trembling. It was only after putting the pen down that I realized I was still clutching the stupid plastic tube like a spear, knuckles white against the blue plastic. The next morning, the store manager pulled me aside. He thanked me for staying calm and doing the right thing. Then he offered me a full-time night shift job, said they could use someone dependable in security-sensitive hours. I smiled, tried to be polite, but there was no way. 5 hours of pure terror was enough for a lifetime. I told him I'd pass. Through the front windows, the first customers were already lining up, baskets in hand, totally unaware that a few hours ago, cans were flying through the air like weapons just meters from where they now stood picking out breakfast cereal. The police collected all the security camera footage. They sealed the helmet into a big plastic evidence bag and packed it off to the squad car. I changed out of my uniform, stuffed it into my backpack, and walked out into the early morning light. My legs felt weak, and my knees almost buckled when I reached the bus stop. There was a new warehouse worker standing outside the main entrance. He looked about 19, skinny, nervous. He saw me and asked, "Hey, is it scary working nights?" I looked at him for a second, then said, "Just don't trust the quiet too much. It'll lie to you." He laughed like I was joking, but I didn't smile. I climbed onto the bus and sat near the window, my eyes scanning every dark reflection for the glint of a mirrored visor. When I first landed in the city, I didn't know much about it. I barely even looked around. My priority was finding a place to stay before my classes started. I was running out of time and energy, so I went through some local forums, searching for anything cheap and close enough to the campus. That's how I found the ad for a room in a big old Victorian house. The woman renting it out, Vera, offered it for next to nothing. The pictures showed a place that looked a little worn, but solid. I didn't have the luxury to be picky, so I messaged her and set up a meeting for the same day. When I showed up, the house was even bigger than the photos made it seem. The wood panels were dark and a little warped from time, and the porch creaked under my sneakers. Vera was waiting at the door, wearing a thick sweater and jeans, smiling wide. She looked like she was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s. Her hair was tied up messily, and her eyes were bright, almost too much. She waved me in before I could say much. The inside smelled like old wood, dust, and something sharp and sweet underneath it. Later, I realized it was bourbon. She gave me a fast tour. The kitchen with an ancient fridge, a small living room with a TV way too new for the rest of the house, a narrow staircase leading to the second floor where my room was. Everything seemed normal enough. A little cluttered, but nothing worse than what I was used to in shared apartments. After I dropped my bag off, she insisted on showing me the rest of the house. That's when she took me to her bedroom. She pushed the door open like it was some kind of big reveal. The walls hit me first, covered top to bottom with photographs. The same man, over and over. Different poses, different clothes, but always the same face. At first, I thought it was some kind of artist she liked. When I squinted, I realized he looked familiar. He was a minor actor from a low-budget TV show I'd seen once or twice. Nothing huge. Vera laughed when she saw my face. "You look just like him," she said, almost singing it. "Like 2 drops of water." I laughed too, mostly to be polite, but something about the way she said it made my skin crawl a little. I mumbled something about it being funny and backed out of the room as casually as I could. She didn't seem to notice. She grabbed a bottle from the kitchen counter, bourbon, and poured herself a drink without offering me one. I said I was tired from the trip, and she nodded, waving me off toward the stairs. That night, after brushing my teeth in a bathroom with a cracked mirror and a toilet that ran too long after flushing, I locked my bedroom door. I usually never locked doors. Grew up in a small town where no one even thought about it. But something about Vera's smile stuck in my head. I pushed a chair under the knob too, just in case. I told myself it was just being careful in a new place. Still, it took a long time to fall asleep, the smell of bourbon and old wood thick in the air. The first few days passed without much trouble. I was busy with classes, filling out forms, getting lost around campus. Vera mostly kept to herself. I'd hear her moving around downstairs, sometimes watching TV, sometimes humming. When we crossed paths in the kitchen or hallway, she was friendly but not pushy. I started to relax a little. Maybe I had just overreacted. But soon, she started coming home later. At first, I just heard the front door banging open sometime after midnight, her boots clumping up the stairs. Then her voice, laughing too loud, mumbling to herself, sometimes switching to crying without warning. Once, around 2 in the morning, I got a voice message from her by accident. A few seconds of breathless giggling, then a long, shaky sigh. I was usually dead asleep by 3, trying to keep up with all the coursework. I started wearing earplugs to bed, but even then, some nights I still woke up. One night, though, it wasn't noise that woke me. It was a feeling, like something was wrong. I pulled the plugs out and sat up. That's when I heard it. Soft, almost a whisper, but clear as day. She was saying my name, right outside my door. I froze. I didn't breathe. Her voice was slow, dragging the syllables out like she was tasting them. I heard a small tap, like metal against wood. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, heart hammering. Then a sharp, loud thunk, like a knife hitting the door. I stumbled backward, grabbing the chair I'd wedged under the knob and jamming it in tighter. The door handle rattled violently, once, twice. The lock held. For a second, everything went dead quiet, except for the buzzing in my own ears. Then I heard breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing, right on the other side of the wood. I sat in the corner with my knees pulled up, staring at the door, gripping my phone without even unlocking it. I couldn't think straight enough to call anyone. I just waited, ears straining for every tiny noise. The breathing stayed for what felt like forever, then slowly drifted away down the hall. It was only around sunrise when I finally dared to move. I opened the door as quietly as I could, still shaking. The hallway was empty. The house was silent. But right in front of my door, half buried in the wooden floorboard, was a kitchen cleaver, its blade sunk deep into the wood. In the morning, Vera acted like nothing had happened. She greeted me with a smile, asked if I wanted coffee, and started talking about the weather like it was any normal day. I mumbled something about having an early lecture and grabbed my bag, heading out without even taking breakfast. I didn't go to campus, though. I just wandered the streets, trying to think. Every few minutes, my mind flashed back to the cleaver buried in the wood, to her whispering my name. I texted a couple of friends, explained the situation. Everyone said the same thing. Get out now. But it wasn't that easy. I had too much stuff in the room, and technically I had signed a rental agreement. I didn't know if just leaving would cause legal problems later. I needed a plan. I spent the whole day pacing around the park, sitting on benches, staring at my phone. That night, I prepared a small backpack. Just essentials: passport, cash, charger, a few clothes. I stuffed it into the back of the closet where it wouldn't be seen. Vera left around her usual time, clutching her bourbon bottle. The door slammed behind her a little louder than before. I sat on my bed for a while, listening to the old house settle. Every creak and crack made me jump. Once I was sure she was gone, I pulled out my phone and started gathering evidence. I took photos of the cleaver still wedged in the floor. I went downstairs and quickly snapped pictures of her bedroom walls, covered with the actor's face. My face. I played back the voice messages she'd sent during her drunken nights, recorded them separately for backup. I wanted something to show if things got worse, something to explain myself. I was about to shut the phone off when a new message popped up. It was from Vera. The text was simple, but my blood ran cold reading it. "You won't leave me, right?" The next evening, I knew it was now or never. I kept my backpack close, hidden under the bed. I stayed fully dressed, pretending to study while waiting for the right moment. I heard her come back later than usual. The sound of her boots echoed through the hallway, but she didn't head straight to her room. Instead, she wandered back and forth, humming to herself. Then music started playing, low at first, then louder, some slow, droning song that made my skin crawl. I waited, holding my breath, counting the minutes. When the music finally faded into silence, I grabbed the backpack and moved quietly. I didn't even bother turning off the light in my room. I wanted her to think I was still inside. My hand shook a little as I gripped the doorknob, listening hard for any sounds from downstairs. When I made it to the front door, I noticed something wrong. The intercom light was blinking. Someone had rung it recently. On the top step, almost hidden in the dark, lay a packet of superglue and a piece of cord wound tightly like a snake. My stomach dropped. She must have been planning to block the door shut. Maybe she got distracted. Maybe she thought she had more time. Without thinking, I yanked the door open and ran into the yard. The air outside hit me like a slap, cold and sharp. I glanced back once, just once. Vera was standing at an upstairs window, staring down at me. Her face was blank, expressionless, like she wasn't even seeing me. Slowly, she wiped the fogged-up glass with her hand, leaving a long, smeared mark across the window. I didn't wait to see what she'd do next. I sprinted toward the bus stop, never looking back again. The university put me up in a dorm temporarily while they reviewed my housing contract. I didn't even care that I was sharing a tiny room with 2 other students. Anywhere was better than that house. Vera kept sending messages for days after. Dozens of them. Sometimes laughing, sometimes coughing, sometimes just breathing into the microphone. A few times, she called me by the actor's name, not my own. I finally blocked her number. I couldn't take it anymore. Even when I wasn't listening to her voice, it felt like she was whispering in my ear, somewhere just out of sight. Sometimes my classmates send memes in the group chat, jokes about that old show where the actor was famous. Everyone thinks it's funny. They have no idea why I never laugh. Every time his face pops up, my chest tightens. It's not his face anymore that I see. It's mine, staring back at me from 100 crooked yellowing posters. I still keep the photo of the cleaver saved on my phone, just in case someone ever questions why I had to break my lease. I tell myself it's proof that I'm not crazy, that it all really happened. Once in a while, when I walk past old Victorian houses, and there are plenty in this city, I catch myself glancing up at the windows, always half expecting to see her face pressed against the glass, staring down. But the worst part isn't seeing her. It's that I still can't remember the real actor's face. No matter how hard I try, no matter how many times I search for it online, it's gone. All I see is my own reflection, multiplied endlessly across those peeling, stained wallpapers. And every time, for just a second, I'm scared that one of those copies will finally step out from the wall, and this time, I won't be fast enough to get away. I always downloaded movies because, honestly, money was tight. Going to the cinema or paying for subscriptions just wasn't something I could do all the time. Most days after school, I'd scroll through shady sites, pick a movie, and hit download without a second thought. One evening, as I waited for a file to finish, a window suddenly popped up on my screen. It wasn't the usual annoying ad. This one was different. It was clean, official looking, and right in the center. Illegal copying detected. Pay the fine. Underneath, a timer started counting down from 48 hours, warning that if I didn't pay, a specialist would be dispatched to my address. I stared at it for a good minute. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of virus. I mean, it didn't even ask for payment details right away, just showed a ticking clock. I closed the tab without touching anything else and rebooted my laptop, hoping it would go away. It did, mostly. For the next few days, I didn't see the pop-up again, so I figured it had been a glitch or just a scam attempt. A week later, I was sitting in the school library after classes, finishing some homework, when I checked my old school email. I barely used it anymore, but there it was, a new message sitting in my inbox. Same wording as before. Illegal copying detected. Pay the fine. 48 hours until specialist dispatch. It even had a copy of the same timer embedded in the email. My stomach tightened. I thought about telling my parents, but they were already stressed about bills and work. I knew they'd be furious if they thought I'd gotten the family into legal trouble. So, I said nothing. I told myself it was just another scam, another desperate attempt to get money from gullible people. That evening, I sat on the living room floor with my little brother, playing some old shooter game we'd found in a discount bin. We laughed and yelled at the screen, chasing headshots and trying to beat each other's scores. After a while, I forgot about the email. It was just spam, nothing real. But even while I laughed, something gnawed at me. Little things, like the way the house seemed too quiet when I stopped talking, or the way the shadows from the streetlights shifted just a bit too much when I looked outside. And the biggest thing, the creeping feeling that someone, somewhere, already knew where we lived. The phone rang late that night, right when we were getting ready to turn off the console. The landline, the one only telemarketers and old relatives ever used anymore. My brother groaned and rolled his eyes, telling me to just let it ring. But I picked it up anyway, mostly out of habit. "Good evening," the man said, his voice smooth but cold, like the way ice feels if you press your fingers against a frozen window. "This is Inspector Orloff, Copyright Enforcement Department." For a second, I couldn't answer. He sounded so calm, so official. I finally croaked out a "hello," and he continued like he was reading off a form. "I'm just confirming your address," he said, and then rattled off our street name and house number without hesitation. "And your father's name is Sergey, correct?" I felt my throat tighten. He shouldn't have known that. "Not from an email scam." I swallowed and said, "Yes, they're home," lying before I even realized it. My voice sounded wrong to my own ears, too high-pitched, like I was trying too hard to sound casual. "Excellent," he said. "I'll be there within the hour to complete the on-site protocol. Please have the documentation ready." He hung up before I could say anything else. I stood there with the receiver still in my hand, listening to the dial tone. Moving without thinking much, I locked the front door. Then the back door. Then the tiny door to the garage. I went from window to window, dropping the blinds and pulling the curtains tight. Every time the fabric swished against the glass, It felt too loud, like I was making noise that could draw attention. "What's wrong?" my brother asked, following me around, grinning like it was some kind of game. "You act like the boogeyman's coming." "It's just precaution," I muttered. My hands were shaking, but I kept them busy, checking the locks again. He laughed, still thinking it was funny. "Relax, it's just spam. They can't actually come after you." I didn't answer him. I just went to the living room and turned off every light except for the small lamp by the couch. My brother plopped down next to me, still holding a controller in one hand, swinging his legs off the side like it was any other night. But deep down, I knew he was wrong. Spam didn't know our street. Spam didn't know my father's full name. Spam didn't make phone calls at almost midnight. About 40 minutes later, I heard the gate click at the end of our driveway. I reached over and switched off the hallway light, moving slowly so the shadows wouldn't shift too much. Peeking through the thin slit between the blinds, I saw two men standing by the gate. They wore dark jackets with some kind of fake-looking patches on the sleeves. In the dim light, I could barely make out what they were doing, but their movements were clear enough. They were fiddling with the lock, trying to force it open. My brother tugged at my sleeve and whispered that we should call our parents. But I was already dialing 911, keeping my voice low when the operator picked up. I gave them the address, barely moving my lips, never looking away from the window. Before I could finish the call, a loud, sudden alarm blared from the neighbor's yard. It was sharp enough to make my brother jump and me nearly drop the phone. The two men froze, exchanged fast hand signals, and backed away from the gate. I stayed completely still, heart hammering against my ribs. They retreated into the dark, slipping into a car that had been parked just outside the range of the streetlights. I squinted through the blinds, noticing something that made my mouth go dry. There were no license plates on the car, no front plates, no back plates, just a gray, dirty sedan that started rolling away without even turning on its headlights. Only after the car disappeared around the corner did I realize I was still gripping the door handle so tightly that my hand hurt. I let go slowly, breathing out for the first time in what felt like an hour. The police arrived fast, but by then, the men were long gone. Two officers, both young and serious-looking, took our statements separately, walking through the yard with flashlights and checking the broken lock on the gate. They confirmed what I was already starting to believe. The patches on the men's jackets were just stickers you could order online. Nothing official about them. The whole copyright inspector thing was just a cover. According to the cops, the way these guys worked was simple. Pose as some kind of authority figure, talk their way into homes, and once inside, clean the place out fast. Electronics mostly. Easy to grab, easy to resell. After that night, my parents had all the locks changed the very next day. We installed motion detectors by the doors and a security camera over the porch. I wasn't allowed to touch my laptop without supervision for a while. My parents were furious, not just because of the downloads, but because I had kept everything a secret. Sitting around the kitchen table while my dad signed the security company's paperwork, I tried to explain how stupid I felt. How a harmless little habit, saving a few bucks on movies, had almost cost us something way bigger. Nobody said much after that, but the silence was heavier than yelling would have been. From then on, we only watched movies from official streaming services. Every time I typed in my card number to renew a subscription, I thought about those two men outside our gate. The way they moved, the way they didn't hesitate. I thought about the fact that a few dollars saved almost cost us everything. Some of the neighbors joked about it for a while, calling it the pirate raid, like it was some local legend. They laughed when they talked about how two kids with a game controller and a landline fended off fake inspectors. But the jokes didn't last long. About a month later, a group of college students living a few blocks away got their house broken into. Same method. Fake emails, a fake warning, a phone call to confirm addresses. Only this time, the students weren't cautious. They opened the door. The police later explained that it was the same group. They'd been scouring forums, pulling contact info from sketchy download sites, sending out the scare emails, and moving fast. Once they were inside, they would walk out with TVs, laptops, consoles, everything that wasn't nailed down, claiming it was being seized as evidence. After the incident, I spent a weekend putting together a guide and sending it to everyone I knew from school. How to recognize fake warnings, how to check email headers, how to never, ever trust someone just because they say they're official. A lot of people made fun of me. Some said I was paranoid. But I noticed most of them turned on two-factor authentication after reading it. Some even told me quietly that they started checking locks before bed. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the phone ringing in my dreams. That same flat, cold voice on the line, asking for my name, reading it back to me like a script. Sometimes it feels like I can still feel the plastic of the receiver trembling in my hands, can still see the screen timer ticking down. But now, when I open my laptop, I don't see warnings or fake countdowns anymore. Just a green little streaming icon, and fine print about terms and conditions that I read all the way to the end, every single time. The weirdest part is, it all started totally normal. We had just wrapped up the second day of the seminar, one of those corporate retreats where they force you out into the middle of nowhere to reconnect with your mission. The whole place was ringed by crappy motels and run-down bars, all flashing neon signs half buzzing in the night. Me and Luis just wanted a beer, something cold, easy, and fast. No crowds, no lines. We walked a few blocks, past a diner that looked like it hadn't been open since '92, when we found this bar sitting on the corner. The place had a few red ales glowing behind the counter like actual lamps. It looked kind of fake, almost too colorful. We shrugged and went in. The bartender didn't even ask for ID, just grunted something about strawberry seasonal only today, and filled 2 pint glasses for us. It tasted fine. A little too sweet maybe, but after sitting through 6 hours of PowerPoints, it was perfect enough. We weren't even halfway done with our beers when this guy slid into the booth next to us. Said his name was Max. Looked about our age, maybe a little younger. He had one of those event lanyards still hanging from his wrist, some festival badge with bright lettering I didn't recognize. Max seemed friendly enough, asking what brought us to town. We told him about the seminar. He laughed and said if we really wanted to see something, there was a night format happening tonight. One you don't want to miss. Luis joked about being old men with morning meetings, and we politely turned him down. Max didn't push, just nodded and tapped his glass against ours before moving to talk to a group near the pool table. We finished our beers, paid cash, and headed back outside. The air had that kind of chill that sticks to your clothes, almost like dew. We cut through a side alley to make the walk shorter. It ran behind a row of abandoned warehouses, the kind with boarded-up windows and old loading docks. Luis was talking about the insane prices for renting spaces downtown, figuring if the city was dying, maybe rents would crash too. His voice bounced off the concrete walls. About 2 blocks down, I felt this weird throbbing start in my temples. Nothing crazy, just enough to notice, like my pulse was too loud inside my own head. I rubbed at my forehead and tried to shake it off. Luis stumbled a little and muttered something about how everything looked like it had a double shadow. I figured maybe the beer was stronger than we thought, or maybe it was just the weird streetlights messing with us. We decided to call a ride. I pulled my phone out and tried to open the app, but the screen wouldn't focus. It wasn't cracked or anything. It was just blurry, like it was underwater. I wiped it against my jacket, tried again. Same thing. Luis was having the same problem, cursing under his breath as he poked at his own screen. Then it was like everything flipped off at once. No more streets, no more lights, No sound except my own breathing. Just smears of color melting into each other like someone had dumped water over a painting. I don't know how long that lasted. It could have been 5 seconds or an hour. No streets, no sky, just that swirling mess. Next thing I knew, I was blinking awake on a park bench. My clothes were damp and cold, sticking to my back. It was still dark out. Early morning maybe. I could see the faint outline of a jungle gym and a broken swing set a few yards away. The metal was slick with dew. My head felt heavy, like I'd been dragged under and hauled back out. Luis was there too, sitting slumped on the ground next to the bench, his arms resting on his knees. His palms were scraped raw, little flecks of blood mixed with dirt. His eyes were wide, darting around like he expected something to jump out at us. He wasn't saying anything, just breathing hard. I patted my pockets. No wallet, no phone, no watch. Same for Luis. He just shook his head when I looked at him. My mouth tasted weird, too. Thick and sweet. Almost exactly like that strawberry ale. We stumbled along the sidewalks, not even talking, just keeping each other upright until we spotted a lit-up sign for a 24-hour clinic. It was a squat building tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat, humming under harsh fluorescent lights. Inside, a nurse gave us a quick look and brought us straight in without asking too many questions. A doctor, older guy with deep lines around his eyes, ran some tests. He came back holding a clipboard, frowning. "There's a heavy sedative in your blood work," he said. "Strong stuff. Not something you find over the counter." He said the name of it, but it didn't mean much to me. Luis just stared at the floor. While we sat there, a couple of cops showed up. They took statements right there in the hallway, scribbling notes while the clinic's air conditioning rattled above us. The officer, a woman about my mom's age, told us we weren't the first ones. She said there had been a handful of similar reports lately. People drugged at bars, left without wallets, waking up miles from where they started. I kept thinking back, trying to figure out when it happened. Max. It had to be Max. I realized he never actually drank from his own glass, just talked and joked and tapped his glass against ours, like a distraction. We told the cops everything, but when they checked the bar, they said the security cameras had been conveniently under maintenance. No footage, no backup. The bar didn't have any record of a Max checking in or making a tab either. It was like he'd never been there at all. We had nothing. No way to fill in the gap between 9 at night and 4 in the morning. Just a black hole in our memories. Back at work, it was worse. Our manager brushed it off like some drunken accident. Said something about blurry nights and bad choices. We tried to show him the clinic bill and the police report, but it didn't seem to matter. He looked embarrassed for us more than anything. I wasn't ready to just leave it there. We still had the receipt from the bar, at least. It showed we paid cash at 9:37 p.m. I spent my lunch break a couple days later walking back to that area. In daylight, the bar looked even worse. Faded sign, empty windows. I found a diner a few doors down and asked a waitress if she knew a guy named Max. She wrinkled her nose. "Yeah, him. Seen him maybe 5 times. Always with new people. Always pushing that special beer." She didn't know his real name. Nobody seemed to. I noticed the bar had a new security camera now, a fresh little dome mounted just above the door. I waited until someone came out, pretending to tie my shoe, and caught a snapshot with my phone. Later, zooming in, I saw it. The same festival badge Max wore. Clear as day. Problem was, when I looked up that festival, I found it happened last year, 2 states away. That wristband wasn't fresh. It was a prop. I sent the photo to the detective assigned to our case. She thanked me but said that without a face, without an ID, it wasn't enough. Accessories didn't make a suspect. Luis, meanwhile, quietly canceled all his future work trips. He started carrying bottled water with him everywhere, even to lunch meetings. He said he didn't trust glasses anymore. I didn't blame him. 3 months went by. I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe we just got unlucky, and the guy had moved on to the next city. Then one night, clearing out my junk mail, I saw it. Subject line, "New strawberry seasonal, only today." The email had a tiny photo embedded. Just a pint glass with that same bright foam, almost glowing. No real text, no sender's name. I didn't open anything, just deleted it. An hour later, another one came. Different email address, same subject. This time, the sender's name was Max. I called the cops again. They said there wasn't much they could do. Emails like that were hard to trace, and technically, nobody had made a threat. I was advised to be cautious and document anything suspicious. That night, I drove straight to an electronics store and bought the best home security camera I could afford. Bolted it to the frame above my front door, wired it straight into my phone. Every time the motion alert buzzed, my heart jumped a little. Nobody came. Not yet. But some nights, when I pass by an open bar, I catch a faint whiff of something sickly sweet, like strawberries hanging in the air. I tell myself it's nothing, just my brain playing tricks. Still, deep down, I know we didn't just lose a few hours and a couple of wallets that night. They took something else. Maybe something we still haven't figured out yet. Maybe something we never will. The first thing that hit me was how fast the dark dropped down. 1 second I was messing with the zipper on the new sleeping bag, thinking about maybe making a fire, and the next, the camp was swallowed up. The sky went from pink to black like someone flipped a switch. I was at this small pull-off by the river, testing out some new camping gear. Just a one-night thing, nothing serious. But the mosquitoes were brutal, going straight for my wrists where the sleeves didn't cover. I kept slapping at them, getting more and more pissed off. Finally, I gave up. Decided it wasn't worth it. I wasn't about to sit there bleeding out by a river all night. I packed fast. Sleeping bag, tent, stove. Jammed everything into my pack without much order. The tent stakes were still a little muddy, and the sand from the riverbank stuck to the tent floor as I rolled it up. My hands were shaking a little, but probably just from rushing. I yanked the straps tight, hoisted the pack onto my back, and got moving. I didn't bother with the fire I had planned. Didn't even finish my sandwich. The trail back wasn't far, maybe an hour if I kept a steady pace. I tried to save the headlamp's battery, only clicked it on when the ground got tricky. Roots breaking through the dirt, little gullies washed out by rain. Otherwise, I let my eyes adjust to the half-light. On the left side, I could hear the river sliding by, quiet but steady. On the right, a wall of pine trees, the trunks all tight together like a fence. The air smelled like wet bark and old leaves. About 5 minutes into the walk, I heard it. A crack, like a branch snapping underfoot, up the slope to my right. At first, I didn't even slow down. Probably a squirrel or something. But after another few steps, the sound came again, keeping pace with me. Every time my boot hit the dirt, there'd be this soft, breaking noise from above, just a half-second later. It didn't sound heavy. It didn't sound fast. Just steady, like it was copying me. I kept walking. My mind flicked through options. Could be a deer, a raccoon, even another camper. It was a public trail. But it was Thursday night. I hadn't seen another car at the trailhead. No tents along the river. Nobody fishing. It should have been empty. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Stay calm. Keep moving. But the steps stayed with me. Always a little delayed, like whoever, or whatever, it was needed to hear my step before making their own. I tightened the straps on my pack and picked up my pace. More cracks answered me, quicker now, like someone trying to stay hidden but getting sloppy. The trees pressed in tighter as the path narrowed, and I had to duck under a fallen branch. The river sound got louder, but it didn't drown out the noises from the slope. They stayed with me, matching me. I stopped walking, dead still, just my breath in my ears. The trail in front of me empty, shadows everywhere. Up the hill, the noise stopped too, like it had been waiting for me to freeze. I stood there, straining to hear past the blood pounding in my head. Nothing. Only the soft rush of water and a few mosquitoes whining by my ear. I took a step forward. Crunch. Another faint crackle from up the slope, almost at the same moment. I froze again. The sound stopped too. Heart hammering against my ribs, I squatted down slowly, letting the pack's weight settle onto my heels. Pulled out my emergency whistle from the chest strap. It was just a little orange thing, cheap plastic, but loud. I figured maybe it was a bear. Maybe another hiker who'd gotten turned around. A loud noise could scare off an animal. Maybe get a person to call back. I blew one sharp blast. The sound bounced off the trees and skidded out over the river. Then silence. Total. No callback. No shout. No animal crashing off into the woods. Nothing. I waited, still crouched, body tight, eyes darting through the gloom. After maybe 30 seconds, I pushed up to standing and slipped the whistle back onto the strap. My fingers brushed the handle of the camping knife sheathed on my belt, but I didn't take it out. Not yet. It was probably nothing. Just nerves. Distantly, the logical part of me kept talking. The distance was too far for any real danger. The sounds weren't even close. Just keep moving. Stay smart. Get back to the car. I made myself walk. Not too fast. Just a strong, steady pace. I focused on the path, on the rhythm of my steps. But no matter how much noise the river made or how I tried to tune it out, the sounds from the slope came with me. A twin set of footsteps, light but deliberate. Every time my foot hit the ground, a breath later came the soft, brittle crack from the trees above, like I was pulling the noise along behind me with a string. I quickened my pace again, heart hammering in my throat, hands sweaty on the pack straps. The trail wound tighter against the riverbank, and the pines seemed to lean in closer, heavy and black in the near dark. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. It was better not to know, not to see anything. Just move. Get to the car. And still, with every step I took, the sound followed. A quiet copy, just on the other side of a wall I couldn't see. At first, I tried to keep it simple in my head. Maybe it was just another hiker, someone who didn't want to slide down the steep slope to say hi. Or maybe it was a park ranger, checking who was still wandering around after sunset. Nothing illegal about being here, but still, maybe they wanted to keep tabs on people. I slowed my steps a little, took a breath, and shouted up into the trees, "Hey, everything okay up there?" No answer. Just silence. Even the footsteps froze. My voice sounded weird, stretched out and too loud between the trees. I stood still for a few seconds, waiting, but no one called back. No one moved. I forced a short laugh and muttered, "Forest sounds, right?" Tried to brush it off like that, like it was nothing. But my hand stayed close to the pepper spray in my jacket pocket. I didn't like getting dramatic over a few broken branches, but the way my fingers clenched the strap of my pack without me even thinking about it told another story. My body didn't believe my own excuses. It felt like it was already getting ready to bolt. The lights of the parking lot had to be less than a mile now. I remembered the curve of the trail, the slight downhill slope that would open up into gravel and parked cars. I kept moving, trying to keep my pace natural, not frantic. The river sounded stronger here, and somewhere up ahead, a car horn blared faintly, carried on the wind. I smelled gasoline too, sharp and sour. The parking lot had to be close if I could catch that. I even saw the faint orange glow of the street lamps breaking through the black net of branches. Still, the steps on the slope didn't stop. They didn't get closer, but they didn't fade either. Just stayed there, dogging me, always matching. I didn't even bother thinking about turning back. That would be stupid now. The exit was straight ahead, and no matter who was creeping up there, getting to a public space with cars and people was the smart move. The trees started to thin. The path flattened out, and the gravel crunched under my boots. I stepped out of the forest's mouth like being spit into a new world. Streetlights humming overhead, patches of dry grass waving in the breeze. Right away, I noticed it. The steps above me stopped, not faded out, not stumbled and fell behind. Just gone. Like someone pulled the plug. I turned around, scanned the black rim of the trees where the slope dropped into the woods. Nothing. No movement. No figures in the dark. Just the empty tree line, still and waiting. Behind me, a truck door slammed. A loud, sharp sound that made me flinch, even though it was normal. Probably that noise is what snapped whatever invisible line had been tying those steps to me. I glanced back at the lot. A big, beat-up pickup sat running under one of the lights, exhaust puffing out into the cold air. The driver leaned out the window, squinting at me. "You good, man?" he asked. His voice was casual, but there was a thread of concern in it. I nodded fast, trying to look normal. "Yeah," I lied. "Just slipped on the trail." He didn't press. I got into my car without another word, fumbled with the keys until the engine turned over, and cranked the heater even though the dash said it wasn't that cold. Still, my teeth were rattling together like it was the middle of winter. We pulled out at about the same time. I stayed close to his taillights, feeling better not being alone. As we passed the mouth of the trail, I glanced over. The headlight beam hit the trees, flashing across low branches and rocks. No one stood there. No face. No figure crouching in the dark. By morning, I felt stupid enough about the whole thing that I figured I'd go back. I hadn't packed up carefully the night before and probably left something behind. Sure enough, when I hiked in a little way, there was one of my tent stakes, half buried in the sand near where I'd set up camp. I bent down to grab it and almost left right after that, but something kept me there a second longer. Up along the higher ridge where the trail met the slope, I saw them. Boot prints. Fresh ones. Not my tread. A different pattern, but the size looked close to mine. They ran almost perfectly in line with the trail. Not on it, but just above it, through the thinner brush. Step for step. Like someone had walked parallel to me all the way from my camp to the lot. The prints broke apart where the ground got rocky. I followed them, squinting, picking up bits and pieces. They reappeared closer to the parking lot again, maybe 50 yards out. And then nothing. No prints leading away into the trees. No scuffs down the slope. Just gone. I didn't stick around. Didn't snap pictures. Didn't call the rangers to make a report. What was I going to say? Someone might have followed me? Might have just been another hiker with bad instincts about how to approach someone at night. No facts. Just gut feelings. I drove home and put it out of my head as best I could. But now, even walking downtown, even stepping through the crowded streets by the grocery store, I catch myself listening. Counting steps. Measuring if the rhythm behind me matches mine too perfectly. Waiting to hear that impossible echo again. Every evening, I took the same suburban bus home. It wasn't anything special, just a quiet ride through the small neighborhoods and gas stations. I usually passed the time reading fanfics on my phone or zoning out with my old MP3 player, the same playlist I'd been listening to since high school. It was routine, safe. Something I didn't even think about anymore. I knew the drivers' faces, recognized most of the regular passengers, even the ones I never talked to. One Thursday, when the weather was still cool enough for a jacket, I noticed a bald guy sitting across from me. He wasn't doing anything weird at first, just sitting there. But after a few minutes, I realized he was staring at the unicorn keychain hanging off my backpack. It was a stupid pink thing I'd gotten years ago, worn down but still hanging on. I thought, whatever, maybe he's bored out of his mind. It was a new route for me anyway. I had started taking a slightly different bus because of after-school activities. I shrugged it off and went back to scrolling. A few days later, I caught the bus again. A different number this time because my schedule had shifted. I got on, found an open seat by the window, and didn't even realize he was there until the bus was halfway to my stop. He was sitting across from me again. Same blank look, same heavy stare at my keychain. I shifted a little, plugging in my headphones. I told myself it was nothing. Buses go where people need to go. He probably lived somewhere along the same route. Over the next week, it kept happening. No matter which bus I took, different times, different numbers, somehow, he was there, finding a seat close by, usually across from me. Always watching that stupid unicorn keychain like it had some kind of magic. I started paying more attention without trying to make it obvious. I noticed he never got on at the same stop. Sometimes he boarded after me, sometimes before. He never pulled out a phone, never listened to music. Just sat there. Watching. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound crazy. I could already hear the comments. You watch too many crime shows, or you're imagining things. So I kept it to myself. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just another tired guy commuting home like me. But after a few more rides, it got harder to convince myself. One time, I even got off a stop early, pretending I forgot something. He stayed on the bus. I thought that was a good sign. Maybe it was all in my head. But the next day, when I got on a completely different line that was supposed to take longer but dropped me closer to my house, he showed up again. Same bald head, same faded gray jacket. And this time, he smiled when he sat down across from me, like we were old friends. I stopped reading my phone and just stared out the window, counting the seconds until my stop. When I finally got up to leave, I didn't look back. As summer approached, the school days got shorter. We finished around noon most days, and the buses were less crowded. It felt good to be outside in the sun, even if the heat stuck to my clothes and made the seat backs sticky. One afternoon, I decided to try something different. I got off the bus one stop early, where a big advertising billboard stood half falling apart, covered in layers of old posters. I hid behind it, pretending to read the bus schedule posted there. I figured if he was just a random commuter, he would stay on and leave. The bus hissed as it pulled away. I watched from behind the billboard, heart beating a little too fast. A few people got off. Then, I saw him. He stepped down, moving slow, like he had all the time in the world. He didn't even look around, just headed toward the sidewalk, in the same direction I was standing. I tried to act casual, turning my body slightly so I was half hidden. The sun was beating down harder than usual, and the pavement reflected the heat back into my face. I wiped my hands on my jeans and pretended to squint at the schedule. He walked closer. I could hear the crunch of his boots on the gravel by the sidewalk. I pretended not to notice, just checking the schedule, just waiting for the next bus. No big deal. He came even closer and stopped a few feet away. His voice was rough, like he didn't talk much. "You got a funny little keychain there," he said. "Let's have a chat." I gripped my phone tighter, feeling it slip a little from the sweat on my palms. I turned slightly, keeping my body facing the sidewalk, and said, I gotta go. People are waiting for me at home." My voice cracked halfway through the sentence. It was obvious I was lying. He didn't say anything. He just stepped forward again, closer this time, putting himself directly between me and the path leading toward the rows of quiet suburban houses. His shadow stretched across the sidewalk, blocking the only easy way out. My phone almost slipped from my fingers completely. I bolted back toward the bus lane, my sneakers slipping a little on the loose gravel. By some miracle, the next bus was already pulling up to the curb. I heard fast footsteps behind me, closer now, heavier, like he had decided there was no point pretending anymore. The bus doors creaked open, and I didn't even check the route number. I just ran up the steps and shoved my way inside. He tried to follow, but the conductor stepped into his path, raising a hand and saying something about needing a ticket. That tiny pause gave me just enough time to grab a pass out of my pocket and push through the crowd toward the back of the bus. I ducked into an empty seat, heart punching against my ribs so hard it felt like everyone could hear it. From the back mirror above the aisle, I saw him arguing at the ticket machine. He was digging around in his pockets, his mouth moving fast. The conductor shook his head, distracted for a moment by another passenger. That's when the man threw a handful of coins at the machine and shoved past the checkpoint, scanning the bus until his eyes locked onto me. I pressed myself deeper into the seat, wishing I could disappear. Only 2 stops left until my grandmother's street, but it felt like the bus was crawling, barely moving through traffic. Every time it jerked forward, every time it braked, I thought he would rush back to where I was sitting. He stood by the middle door instead, gripping the pole, his face half hidden in the shadows. When the bus finally groaned to a stop near my grandma's house, I jumped up and squeezed through the narrow aisle before he could react. The door thudded open, and I ran down the steps without looking back. Across the street, standing on the porch, was Mr. Carter, our neighbor, the retired firefighter everyone knew for his booming voice and bright orange baseball cap. He was leaning against the rail, chatting with someone over the phone, but the second I saw that orange cap, it was like a flare in the night. "Help me carry my backpack," I shouted, waving and sprinting toward him like we were best friends. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I needed him to notice. The man from the bus stepped onto the sidewalk behind me. He paused when he saw Mr. Carter, taking in his size and the confident, casual way he stood there. Mr. Carter turned slightly, giving me a puzzled look. "Evening jog, huh?" he called out, smiling like it was just another normal day. For a split second, everything froze. Then the man shifted, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets. He turned without a word and started walking away, his boots crunching lightly against the cracked pavement. We watched as he disappeared into a narrow alley, swallowed up by the deepening shadows. Mr. Carter lowered his phone and looked at me properly for the first time. "You okay, kid?" he asked, voice softer now. I tried to answer, but nothing came out. My throat locked up and tears blurred my vision. I just nodded, clutching my backpack so hard my fingers hurt. Later that evening, my parents called the police. An officer came by and took a full statement while I sat at the kitchen table, still gripping a mug of cold tea I hadn't even touched. We described everything: his build, his clothes, the way he kept following me on different bus routes. They nodded seriously, writing everything down. A few days later, they told us the man matched footage from a supermarket camera. He'd been caught loitering near the entrance, trying to talk to teenagers. No one had managed to pin anything serious on him yet, but there were multiple reports, enough that the bus company agreed to preserve the video records from the past week. The officer said it would help if they ever managed to track him down for good. Since then, I don't ride the bus alone. Either Dad picks me up, or I walk with a friend if it's close enough. I don't even listen to music anymore on the way home. I stay alert, head up, phone unlocked in my hand, ready to call if anything feels wrong. The unicorn keychain sits at the bottom of my desk drawer now. I can't bring myself to throw it away, but I don't want it with me either. It feels like a reminder of how fast something innocent can turn into a nightmare. Every time a bus turns onto our street, I still feel my chest tighten. I clutch my phone a little tighter, thumb hovering over 911, just in case. Mr. Carter started a free self-defense course for teens at the local rec center. I signed up immediately. It's not about thinking I can fight off someone bigger. It's about knowing I won't freeze again. About having some kind of plan if it ever happens a second time. Sometimes, when I catch my reflection in a bus window or a store door, I find myself scanning the faces around me without even thinking, searching for that same creepy half-smile. And every time I realize it's just normal people going about their lives, not watching me, not following me, I breathe a little easier. Especially when a familiar voice calls my name from behind, loud and friendly, not a whisper in the dark. I've seen some crazy things in a decade of night shifts. Mice nesting behind servers, owls swooping through the lobby. But that night started out calm. Too calm. I was doing my usual rounds, nothing special, when I noticed one of the window AC units was missing. I figured maybe they'd removed it during the day for maintenance, but the way the frame was busted open didn't look right. The wood was splintered fresh, not weathered or clean like a planned removal. I felt the first tiny buzz of unease but kept it tight. I pulled out the company tablet and flicked on the internal cams. Third floor motion sensor had just lit up. I made my way to the stairwell, boots thudding heavier than I liked. The place was silent except for the occasional groan of old metal beams. When I reached the first landing, I hesitated. The light in the third floor corridor blinked on by itself. I hadn't touched any switches. I ducked low and peeked around the corner. Someone in a dark balaclava was rifling through the desks like they were flipping through a deck of cards, fast and methodical. Not some drunk kid or vagrant. They knew what they were looking for. I slipped back behind the wall, heart hammering harder now. Pulled up the hidden alert function on the tablet and punched the button. Silent alarms straight to the local precinct. No sirens, no calls. Just a cruiser rolling up if I stayed alive long enough. I leaned against the cold concrete, forcing myself to breathe slow. Every instinct screamed to bolt down the stairs, but if he heard me, it would get messy. I figured it was better to stay close until backup showed. Creeping down a few steps, I tucked myself under the main staircase. Shadows pooled thick around the base. I crouched there, listening. I caught the faint shuffle of boots on tile. He was moving, fast and direct, heading right for the exit. A beam from his flashlight swung across the wall, a jittery long shadow skating alongside it. I could tell by the way he moved that he knew the building, or at least had studied the plans. No hesitation, not even a glance around. Straight for that busted window. I thought about just letting him go. Maybe it would be safer. But I also thought about what he could have taken, or what else he planned to do. I swallowed and shouted, "Police are coming!" hoping it would freeze him, or at least scare him enough to slow down. Big mistake. A split second later, he slammed into me at the stairwell landing. I barely got my hands up before the full weight of him smashed into my chest. It wasn't a punch or anything, just a hard, fast shove. Enough to knock me against the rail. I stumbled back, gasping, trying not to collapse. He didn't even look twice. He hurled himself through the broken window frame, wood cracking again as he caught the side with his boot. I forced myself upright, wrapping an arm tight across my ribs where the impact burned. Gritting my teeth, I staggered over to the security console and flipped on the parking lot floodlight. The yard outside blazed into view. For a moment, I caught him there. Just a black figure against the concrete, sprinting across the lot toward the side alley. He didn't get far. The patrol unit had already pulled up at the next block over. Their headlights caught him as he tried to duck into the shadows. Turned out the alarm had gone straight to the nearest patrol, and they made it here in under 3 minutes. By the time I limped across the lot, still clutching my ribs, the officers already had the guy pinned face down on the asphalt. They twisted his arms back and cuffed him tight while he thrashed and cursed under his breath. I stood back a few feet, catching my breath, half listening as they patted him down. They dumped out his bag on the hood of the squad car. Bunch of flash drives, a cheap-looking laptop, and a fat stack of empty envelopes fell out. No weapons, no cash. One of the officers flipped open the laptop and whistled low. He said something about it being rigged for quick wipes, probably loaded with sensitive info. Turns out the guy wasn't just after loose office gear. He was planning to rip out the accounting archives and melt the hard drives with acid. Another officer muttered, "Smart. He hits places at night wherever there's no proper CCTV." I realized then that my junky tablet cam was the only footage we had. No fancy security system, just a shaky recording off a cheap lens. They asked if I'd be willing to hand it over to cybercrimes, said it could be crucial for the case. I agreed, signing a quick form right there against the car. One of the younger officers handed me a slip of paper, a notice of commendation, and clapped me on the back, careful not to jostle me too much. Then they bundled the guy into the back of the cruiser and drove off, leaving the lot way too quiet behind them. The next morning kicked off with a staff meeting in the director's office. They lined up 3 chairs and practically paraded me in like some kind of war hero. Lot of handshakes, lot of claps on the shoulder. I nodded through it, said thanks when it seemed right. But the whole time my mind circled one simple thought. That window could get pulled out again. Just because we got lucky once didn't mean it wouldn't happen twice. After the meeting, I cornered the director and asked if we could install proper security grates over the windows. No half measures this time. He nodded, serious-faced, scribbling it down in a little leather notebook he always carried. That evening, 2 tech guys showed up with a heavy steel frame and a new impact sensor. I stayed late to watch them bolt it into place. When they finished, I took a slow walk through the 3rd floor. Every window, every lock, checked and double-checked. The office looked calm under the sweep of my flashlight, papers neatly stacked, computers off, chairs pushed in. But every time the floor creaked under my boots, my shoulders jumped a little. I grabbed one of the printed plastic signs from the supply room, "Property under 24/7 surveillance," and taped it right onto the 3rd floor glass. Not for the thieves, for me. A little reminder that we weren't sitting ducks anymore. About a week later, the detective on the case gave me a call. Said the guy we caught had been on the run for a while, wanted for similar jobs across 3 counties. Always the same method. Old window AC units that popped out easy. Quiet break-ins, targeting financial records, not cash or computers. His file was thick, and now he was looking at real time. Maybe even federal charges, depending on what was on the drives they recovered. I went back to my regular night shifts after that. No hero treatment, no big speeches. Just the hum of the building settling around me. But I changed my routine. Every 2 hours, no matter what, I did a full sweep. Floor by floor, window by window. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about being thorough, staying ahead, staying smart. Sometimes when I pass by the server room and hear the low, steady buzz of the AC, or the rattle of the new window grate when the wind kicks up, I feel this small, solid kind of relief. Like a heartbeat that says, still safe. I tell the new guys on orientation that security isn't just alarms and cameras. It's about noticing when something's just a little bit off. It's about checking that broken window twice instead of assuming it's nothing. Most mornings, the office crew shows up, sipping coffee, unlocking doors, turning on computers, never knowing how close they came to losing everything in one bad night. I sit behind the desk, watching the little green lights blink steady across the monitor panel, and I think, As long as they stay green, everything's fine. It was so cold my hands hurt just trying to dribble. The ball barely bounced off the cracked concrete. Jay was laughing, his breath steaming in the air, acting like this was the best idea he ever had. He had pulled me into a game of one-on-one after everyone else had left the half-collapsed playground behind the construction site. "First to 7 points," he said, flashing that grin like it was a dare. My friend Jenna had to leave early for work, said she'd catch me later, and that I could ride back with Jay. "No big deal," she joked. Jay was everyone's favorite, the guy half the school watched like he was a celebrity. At first, it seemed kind of fun, but the longer we played, the worse it got. My jacket wasn't made for this kind of cold. My fingers were stiff, and I couldn't feel the ball half the time. Jay didn't seem bothered. In fact, the longer I shivered, the more he smiled, like my misery was entertainment. Every time I missed a shot, he'd bounce the ball hard off the ground and let it roll past me, forcing me to chase it. It wasn't even about the game anymore. When we finally finished, he won, of course. He clapped me on the back like we were old buddies. My skin burned where his hand landed. The car was parked just past the torn chain-link fence. I practically ran for it. Inside, it was a blast furnace. He had the heated seats cranked up and the fans roaring. I pulled my jacket off, but even then, it felt like I was boiling. Jay didn't turn the heat down. He leaned back, hands behind his head, watching me squirm like he was studying an ant under a magnifying glass. "You know," he said casually, "I've been experimenting, seeing how people react when they're pushed just a little." He said it like he was talking about a science project. Like social experiments, like pranks, but deeper. I forced a laugh through my teeth, wiping sweat from my forehead. My mouth was dry. I thought about asking him to turn the heat down, but something about the way he was staring made me swallow the words. I tugged at my seatbelt instead, trying not to show how bad I wanted out of there. Jay pulled out of the lot, humming to himself, headlights bouncing off piles of gravel and broken pallets. I expected him to head toward town, but after a few turns, the road started to look wrong. He wasn't going back. The main road disappeared behind us, replaced by narrow tracks lined with trees and frozen mud. The gravel crunched louder under the tires. I looked at my phone. No signal. Jay noticed. His smile widened like he knew exactly what I was thinking. "Relax," he said. "I know a spot. Great acoustics." I didn't answer. I kept one hand on my bag, fingers brushing the edge of my charger, my keys, anything solid. Up ahead, a shape loomed out of the trees. A squat, rusted tin shed, no windows, no lights. Jay slowed the car, wheels slipping slightly on the frost. "You have to live fear to beat fear," he said, tapping the steering wheel. "You'll thank me." "I'm good," I said, my voice tight. "Let's just head back." He didn't even pretend to listen. I heard the click of the lock snapping down. For a second, I froze, but then my eyes landed on his phone mounted near the dashboard. He always left it unlocked when driving. Slowly, without making a sound, I reached out and slid it from the cradle. I opened the emergency call screen. My thumb hovered. The air between us felt thick. Jay was still talking about mental experiments and breaking comfort zones. I pressed and held the side button. The emergency alarm countdown flashed silently on the screen. "Another meter," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough for him to hear. "And you'll have every cop in the county out here." Jay's hands jerked. The car jolted to a stop, tires slipping on the gravel. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Jay spun the car around, tires kicking up gravel in a sharp screech. We crawled back toward the main road at 25 miles per hour. He kept muttering under his breath, half laughing, half talking like he wasn't sure what mood he was supposed to be in. Said it was a joke, a way to rehearse some horror show scenario he was working on. I didn't answer. I kept my thumb firm on the SOS button, ready to press it fully if he so much as twitched wrong. The crunch of the rocks under the wheels felt louder than before, like a bag of bones being stepped on. The car shuddered every time we hit a bump. I stared at the dark outline of the trees, counting turns, landmarks, anything that would tell me how far we had to go. My stomach was tight the whole way. When we finally made it onto the highway, the difference hit me like a slap. Streetlights, wide lanes, headlights of passing cars blinding for a second, but comforting too. Real people, real witnesses. Jay shifted gears and started talking faster, almost desperate, apologizing, telling me about his parents, about how they crushed him with pressure for grades, for scholarships, for being perfect. His voice cracked once, but I didn't look at him. I stared at the map on the dash, measuring the distance to Jenna's place. 5 miles. 4. 3. I kept counting, watching every tenth of a mile click down. When he finally rolled to a stop in front of her gate, I unbuckled slowly, making sure I had everything. I slipped out without slamming the door, without looking back. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I blocked his number without hesitation. Only then did I open the navigation app, press home, and start walking toward Jenna's front door under the wash of the porch light. At school, Jay started slipping notes onto my desk during class. Folded tight, passed quick like we were in middle school. I didn't open any of them, didn't even glance at the handwriting. I just shoved them deep into my backpack until I could throw them out somewhere he wouldn't see. After a while, he stopped showing up at basketball practice. Word went around that Jay had lost his edge, that he wasn't the same on the court anymore. Coach told the team he needed a break to get his head right. My friends noticed I wasn't hanging out as much. They asked a few questions, but they didn't push. I picked one friend, the one I trusted most, and told her everything. I made her swear to keep it between us. After that, I started taking taxis home instead of waiting for rides. Burned through my savings faster than I wanted to, but it felt like the only safe choice. Every time a strange car engine growled too close, my hands would tremble before I could stop it. Mom thought I caught a chill from being outside too long. She said my fingers were cold all the time now, asked if I needed better gloves. I just nodded. It was easier to let her believe that than explain the truth. About a month later, my phone got a system update. I wasn't paying attention until I scrolled through the emergency settings. That's when I saw it. The record from that night. 46 seconds. That's how long I had my thumb pressed down on the SOS button before Jay slammed the brakes. I took a screenshot immediately, printed it out at the school library when no one was around, folded it carefully and tucked it deep into my journal. Some nights I pull it out, smooth the paper flat, and remind myself what it sounds like when gravel under your tires is louder than a human voice. Jay deleted all his social media accounts after that. No more stories, no more posts, no more tagged photos with half the school begging for a chance to hang out with him. I heard rumors he switched schools, maybe even left town, maybe found a new group to experiment with. I didn't look for him. I didn't want to know. Instead, I started running sprints at the school track after class, practicing until my legs felt like rubber, until I knew deep down that if I ever needed to run again, I could do it without thinking. Some people say that first crushes fade over time, but sometimes it's not the feeling that fades, it's the road itself. If you're lucky, the gravel stays under your wheels and not in your memory forever. Since I was a kid, I loved climbing around old sheds and barns near our house. It was something I did all the time, just out of boredom mostly. It felt like a little adventure every time. But a few weeks ago, one of the roofs gave out under me, snapped like dry wood. I woke up in the hospital with 2 broken legs and a cast that ran from my thigh down to my toes. They gave me a wheelchair and a pile of college lectures to catch up on, but I couldn't move around much. My family tried to make things normal. They even went to a movie premiere they'd been planning for weeks, thinking I'd be fine at home for a few hours. It was around 7 in the evening when I decided to throw on a podcast. Something light, just background noise while I stared out the window, watching the sky turn dark. The back of our house looked out over a big empty lot, and at the far end was the wreck of the shed I fell through. I didn't expect to see anything, but when the streetlight flicked on, I caught a glimpse of 2 figures standing out there. At first, I thought it was some of my friends messing with me. I mean, who else would think to wear those weird ceramic masks? One had the sad face of tragedy, and the other had the wide grin of comedy. They looked shiny and smooth under the light. No cracks, no holes for mouths, just empty black eyes staring toward the house. It was too detailed, too serious looking for a prank. I waited, watching for them to move or laugh or run off, but they didn't. They just stood there, perfectly still. Then they started walking toward the house. Not fast. Slow, heavy steps, like they had all the time in the world. The porch light caught the slick gleam of the masks, highlighting the deep, dark eye sockets. My stomach dropped. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. I rolled backward in my chair, fumbling for the switch to turn off the living room light. The room plunged into darkness, and I pushed myself under the staircase where the shadows were thickest. I kept my phone pressed against my stomach, screen down, the podcast still whispering through one earbud. I stayed there, breathing shallow, listening. The first sound was a gentle tap against the glass of the living room window. Soft, careful, almost polite, like they were testing how strong the glass was. I heard the same sound again, closer this time, on the kitchen window. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Then, through the crack under the staircase, I heard whispers. I couldn't make out all the words at first, but then one came clear, almost sing-song. "Can we come in?" Another voice answered lower. "Let us in." I froze. My heart was hammering against my ribs, and I remembered my phone was still on. I quickly slid it out, hands shaking, and killed the vibration. Right after I did, my mom's caller ID popped up on the screen. I stabbed the power button to stop it from lighting up. I held my breath, hoping they hadn't seen the faint glow. From somewhere near the back of the house, I heard the metallic clink of a door handle being tried. Then another. They were checking every entrance. Garage door, back door, even the old storm door we never used. The soft rattle of each handle sent fresh jolts through me. I could picture them, heads cocked, masks shining in the dark, moving from door to door, patiently. Under my arm, where the heavy cast rested against the side of my ribs, I felt the fiberglass shudder with every tiny tremor of my body. The pain in my legs was dull but getting sharper, like the fear was waking it up. I gritted my teeth, trying not to shift or make a sound. Then, a different noise. A sharp snap. One of the door handles gave way, metal wrenching out of wood. I heard the soft whine of the hinges as the door slowly opened somewhere in the back of the house. Cold air crept in. I squeezed the armrests of my chair so hard my knuckles hurt, biting down a gasp. I stayed completely still, straining my ears to catch any sound of where they were. That's when I heard it. A distant hum, low and steady, coming closer. A car engine. The neighbor was coming back in his SUV. I caught the first flash of his headlights sweeping across the yard. As soon as the light touched the figures, they froze. For one long second, they didn't move at all. Then they bolted, running fast toward the garden fence at the edge of the property. I didn't waste time. I reached out and flipped on every light switch I could reach, flooding the house with light. I wanted to make it clear someone was inside. The neighbor's headlights swung back, catching me in the window. He slowed down, stopping his SUV right at the edge of the driveway. He kept the beams pointed into the backyard, lighting up the grass and trees. I could just barely make out the shapes of the masked figures slipping away behind the trees, disappearing into the dark. In the wet grass, I saw the faint smudges of their footprints. A minute later, my phone buzzed in my lap. It was the neighbor. I answered, voice shaking so bad I barely got the words out. "I think someone tried to break in." "I see you," he said, voice steady. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." He grabbed a baseball bat from his truck and stood by the front gate, watching the yard without moving. I stayed pressed under the stairs, clutching the armrests of my chair, feeling like a trapped animal. It wasn't long before the red and blue lights of a police car washed over the front of the house. Only then did I finally exhale. That night, I learned how much simple headlights could matter when your legs couldn't carry you anywhere. The police were thorough. They found the two masks thrown into the bushes by the garden fence. Heavy ceramic, cold to the touch. Up close, they were hand-painted with tiny, careful brushstrokes, the kind of work you only see in real craftsmanship. Each mask had little differences, barely noticeable unless you looked close. A chip on the corner, a thinner line of blue paint around the eyes. They also found the trail of muddy boot prints leading away from the yard, down toward the dirt road that ran behind the neighborhood. But the tracks faded out fast, lost in the gravel and dead leaves. My parents didn't even argue. They installed a full security system the next day. Cameras, alarms, floodlights that would snap on at the slightest motion. After that, they didn't leave me alone at night anymore. Not once. Still, sometimes late at night, when the wind howls through the ventilation shafts, I swear I hear a whisper. That same phrase, "Can we come in?" I tell myself it's just the house settling, or maybe the wind. But deep down, I know what I heard. The masks now sit in an evidence locker somewhere. I've seen the photos. The officer handling the case told us that each mask had a distinct brush style, probably different artists, maybe even different places of origin. None of that mattered much to me. What stuck in my mind was the way they waited. That pause between tapping on the window and whispering their question. It wasn't frantic or aggressive. It was almost patient, polite even. That's what scared me the most. The way they set a trap just by being polite, making you feel like you had a choice. Now, even when friends come over and ring the doorbell, I don't answer right away. First, I check the cameras. Then, if it feels safe, I open the door. Maybe. 3 months later, the doctors finally cut the casts off my legs. I still use the wheelchair out of habit, rolling through the house even though I could technically limp short distances. The chair became like a shield. Every night, before I went to bed, I'd wheel it over to the bottom of the stairs. Not because I needed it to climb, but because it reminded me of that night. How fast things can go wrong when you think you're safe. The neighbor jokes now, says I'm my own one-man night watch. I laugh along with him, but I always make a point to rattle off how many floodlights are burning in the yard. 5 along the fence line, 2 over the garage, 1 on the back porch that never shuts off anymore. Police still haven't found the people who wore the masks. They think it might be part of some ritualistic group that breaks into houses for thrill or initiation. No confirmed leads yet. Nothing solid. About a month ago, I overheard a cop say something weird. In a nearby town, someone reported a stolen collection of antique porcelain masks. Real collector's items. Detailed. Old. Supposedly priceless. Was it a coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. Now every day I work harder at physical therapy, trying to walk without dragging my legs. But at night, I still sleep near the window. I like having a clear view of the driveway, the road beyond, any car that might pull up. Even if the streetlights sometimes feel too bright and make it harder to sleep, I don't mind. Better that the light blinds me than let the masks slip back out of the dark. The last few days of summer break were ticking away, and my parents had left for a business trip that morning. It was just me in the house, and even though I was a little too old to be scared of it, the silence still got to me sometimes. To make it feel less empty, I decided to set up a movie night with the projector in the living room. I pulled the curtains tight, popped a bag of popcorn in the microwave, and settled into the couch with a thick blanket wrapped around me. The movie I picked was some old thriller where the bad guy crept through a hallway, and the tension was just starting to build when something in the corner of my eye made me stiffen. In the reflection of the glass bathroom door down the hall, I caught the flash of a light that didn't belong. It wasn't coming from the movie. The angles were all wrong. I told myself it was just the movie playing tricks on me, that maybe the light from the screen bounced weird. But the longer I watched, the more I realized the movement of the light didn't match anything happening in the film. I sat up straighter, pulling the blanket off. The flashlight outside the bathroom door moved slow and steady, scanning like someone trying not to be seen. My heart kicked up. I knew the outdoor lights on the driveway were supposed to come on when they detected sound or movement, but they stayed off, and that wasn't right. I grabbed the remote and killed the sound of the movie. Suddenly, the house felt way too loud. The hum of the fridge, the soft buzz of electricity in the walls, the sharp whine of the popcorn machine cooling down. And cutting through it all, a whispery, crackling voice floated from the kitchen. It was the radio. I never turned on the radio. I pushed off the couch and padded silently across the living room, barefoot, trying not to make a sound on the cold wooden floor. The radio sat on the counter, the little green light glowing faintly, a man's voice muttering about some late-night ad deal. I reached out and snapped it off with one quick twist, then froze again. Was it safer to stay put or move upstairs? I glanced at the front door. The flashlight beam flicked against the window, way too close now. I backed away, hands shaking, and grabbed my phone out of my hoodie pocket. First thing I did was call my dad. It rang, and then his voicemail clicked on. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear for a second longer, listening to the empty beep, then hung up and punched in 911 with clumsy fingers. I had to say my address twice because my voice was cracking, but the dispatcher kept calm, asking me if I could see the person. I told her no, just the light. She told me to stay hidden and stay on the line. I heard the locks on the doors snap shut one by one. The auto-lock system my dad had installed last year kicked in. All the lamps in the living room came on at once, blasting bright white light in every corner, like a stage setup. I crouched lower behind the couch, panicking that whoever was outside could now see exactly where I was. The door to the screened-in porch rattled. I heard the squeal of the spring-loaded hinge as someone tugged at it hard enough to stretch the metal. I clamped my hand over the phone to muffle the tiny sounds it made and curled up tighter behind the couch, pressing my body into the smallest space I could fit. Minutes stretched out unbearably long. The dispatcher's voice kept checking in, asking if I was still there, telling me help was on the way. I whispered back yes each time, barely loud enough to be heard. My eyes stayed locked on the front door, then the kitchen window, then the hall, scanning for any sign of movement. Finally, after what felt like forever, but was probably less than 10 minutes, the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers lit up the front yard. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of car doors, shouts, commands. I stayed frozen until a police officer pounded on the door and yelled, "Police! Come out with your hands up!" I crawled out from behind the couch and stumbled to the door, unlocking it with shaking hands. They rushed in, checking every room, guns drawn, while another officer guided me outside. They found boot prints in the soft dirt near the porch, deep and heavy, leading off toward the woods at the back of our lot. A couple of cops followed the trail, flashlights sweeping back and forth through the trees. But by the time they got there, Rain had started falling, washing everything away. I stayed at our neighbor's house for a few nights until my parents came back. Mrs. Callahan lived across the street and had one of those little guest rooms that smelled like lavender and old books. I kept my phone clutched to my chest even when I slept, though sleep didn't really come easy. An officer had stopped by the next morning and explained there had been a couple of break-ins nearby, always in houses without alarms. After my parents got home, Dad immediately called a security company. By the end of the week, we had glass break sensors installed in every window and a camera pointed at every door. Even with all that, I would lay in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling. The slightest noise, a tree branch scraping the siding, a car idling down the block, had me wide awake. Mom stuck a little laminated sign on the bathroom mirror. Check the yard before bed. It was supposed to be comforting, like a checklist, but all it did was remind me what we were scared of. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of a street sweeper or a neighbor's lawn service. For half a second, I'd think it was that flashlight again, cutting through the dark. I'd lie there, gripping the edge of my blanket, listening. We never got any video of the intruder, no witnesses either. The only thing left was a smudged handprint on the glass door of the porch. I never wiped it off. No matter how many times Mom suggested it, I left it there. It was proof that I hadn't imagined it, that fear could leave a real mark, even if it was blurred and almost invisible now. A few days later, the news spread fast through the neighborhood. A few streets over, someone had broken into a house that didn't have any kind of alarm. They took laptops, jewelry, some gaming systems. The police told us they were linking the cases together, but there were still no solid leads. Just muddy boot prints and vague reports about a tall man in a hoodie. I even showed them a photo of the handprint, but the officer just nodded politely. It was too blurry to mean anything. That night, we started pulling all the blinds shut as soon as it got dark. It made the house feel smaller, but at least we didn't have to look out into the endless black of the backyard. I listened harder to every tiny sound. The soft pop of the freezer, the low gurgle of the water heater, the creak of the old couch springs settling. Every night, my heart raced like it was trying to punch a hole through my ribs. Dad started playing soft music from his phone at bedtime, something calm, so the silence wouldn't be so loud. They promised me we'd get a guard dog. I always liked cats better, easier, quieter. But when they asked if I was okay with a dog, I said yes without thinking twice. They smiled, happy to see me agree so fast, thinking it meant I was feeling better. I smiled back too, but really, I was just counting the seconds until morning. 3 months passed, and the backyard stayed quiet. The cameras caught nothing but squirrels and the neighbor's cat prowling at night. It should have made me feel safer, but it didn't. Some nights, the neighbor's porch light would flicker through the trees, and a shadow would glide across the frosted glass of our bathroom window. Every single time, I told myself it was just a maple leaf caught in the wind. But I always grabbed my phone, snapped a photo, and compared it with the ones I took before, just to be sure, just to check if anything had changed. Dad jokes sometimes that I'm our house's personal security team now. I used to laugh along with him, until one night it hit me that he wasn't really wrong. I was the one who checked the locks twice before bed. I was the one who stayed up listening for things no one else seemed to hear. Because if I didn't notice the extra shadow, if I didn't catch the wrong glint of light on the glass, then who else would? The old handprint is still there on the porch door, almost invisible now except in the right light. It's faded, but not gone. Just enough left to remind me that fear has a shape. And until the day it disappears completely, I won't let myself forget that here, in this house, the doors only stay closed if someone inside makes sure of it. The loud slam of the door shook the glass so hard that a few people sitting by the window looked up. I froze at the register, fake smile still glued to my face. He had stomped out, his boots making sharp sounds on the floor, and the heavy metal handle of the door still vibrated in place. A few napkins fluttered off the counter. My coworker, Jenna, leaned over from the sandwich line and said, "Don't worry about it. Every week it's something. Last month a guy tried to pay with Canadian coins." I nodded, forcing a chuckle, but my hands felt too tight around the register keys. It wasn't just the yelling. It was how quickly he went from calm to furious, like flipping a switch. He'd come in around 3 in the afternoon when the shop was pretty empty. Ordered a turkey club, but then started arguing about some promotion. Buy one, get one free, claiming it was supposed to be today. I'd never even heard of that deal. I smiled, told him maybe he was thinking of another place, but he just kept pushing, his voice rising, cheeks turning red. When I said we couldn't honor a discount we'd never had, he slammed his palm on the counter, making the cash drawer rattle. I just stood there, nodding, trying not to escalate. Now it was after closing. We shut down at 9 sharp, and it was close to 10 when I was still mopping near the front. The neon closed sign buzzed against the glass door. I dragged the mop bucket toward the counter and noticed it. Right on the glass, a smudged handprint, bigger than my own, right at eye level. My stomach twisted a little. I dunked the mop head into the dirty water and grabbed a rag from under the sink. Wiped the print off in one long swipe, watching it vanish. The glass stayed streaky, but I told myself it didn't matter. I just wanted to lock up and forget the whole thing. In the back, the small metal sink was filled with warm, soapy water, and I stood there counting out the till, quarters clicking against the counter. The overhead light buzzed faintly, and the kitchen smelled like bleach and old ham. I was almost done, bills stacked in rubber bands by denomination, when the chain on the front door rattled hard. I froze, a $5 bill dangling from my hand. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind. Then it rattled again, harder, sharper, like someone yanking on it with both hands. The tiny bells we kept on the inside door handle jingled once, then fell silent. I didn't move for a second, just listened. Through the thin walls, a low voice came, muffled but clear enough. "Come on, open up. Just want to talk." The hair on my arm stood straight up. I dropped the cash into the drawer, quietly snapped it shut, and flipped off the kitchen light with a shaking hand. The front half of the shop was still lit by the neon signs outside, throwing weird pink and blue shadows across the tables. I crouched low, trying not to make any noise, and started crawling toward the back room where the landline was mounted above the prep table. The voice came again, closer, pressing against the glass. "Open up, girl. Don't be stupid." I grabbed the phone, almost knocking over a stack of lettuce bins. My fingers were slippery as I punched 911. The dial tone buzzed in my ear for half a second before a calm voice answered, asking for my emergency. "There's a man outside," I whispered, voice cracking. "He's trying to get in. He was here earlier. He's angry." The operator told me to stay calm, said a patrol was nearby and on its way. I clutched the phone to my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible behind the counter. The chain on the door rattled again, more violently this time, and then came a loud thud, a fist slamming hard against the glass. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, heart hammering so loud it felt like it shook my whole body. "I just want to explain," he shouted, voice slurred a little now, maybe from anger, maybe from something else. "You don't have to be scared. Come on, open up." Another bang against the glass, and the window shivered in its frame. I scooted back farther under the prep counter, pulling my knees to my chest, the phone still pressed to my ear. The operator kept talking, telling me the patrol would be there any second, to stay hidden, to stay quiet. Every second dragged out longer than an entire work shift. I kept staring at the thin metal back door that led into the alley, praying he wouldn't think to go around. The alarm went off so suddenly it felt like the whole building was shaking. A sharp, deafening wail sliced through the air, bouncing off the walls and vibrating the glass door where he was still yanking at the handle. I dropped the phone, clamping my hands over my ears. The siren wasn't just loud, it was physical, crawling into my skin. Through the front windows, flashing red and blue lights painted the parking lot in jolts. Tires screeched somewhere close, and the man at the door flinched. I saw him stumble back, trying to run, but the asphalt was slick from a light rain earlier. His feet slipped out from under him, and he hit the ground hard, palms slapping against the wet blacktop. 2 officers came into view from the side of the building, moving fast. They didn't yell or hesitate. One swung wide to cut him off while the other charged straight at him. They pinned him between them in a tight formation, forced him up against the side of a patrol car. One officer shoved his head down over the hood while the other cuffed his hands behind his back. I stayed crouched under the counter, gripping the edge so tight my knuckles hurt, watching through the window. Another squad car pulled up behind them, blocking the entrance to the lot. An officer checked the man's pockets, while another popped the trunk of a beat-up sedan parked crooked near the curb. From my hiding spot, I saw them pull out a heavy crowbar and a pair of thick black gloves. One officer held them up to the other, who just shook his head, looking grim. Later, they told me this wasn't his first stop today. He'd been at another sandwich place a few miles away, pulling the same stunt about an old promotion. When the officer finally came to the door and gestured for me to come out, I stood on shaking legs. I barely managed to push the door open. My voice cracked as I said, "Thank you. Thank you for the alarm. If it wasn't for that..." I couldn't even finish the sentence. The officer just nodded and said, "You did the right thing. Go home and rest." The sandwich shop stayed closed the next few days. Our boss had the front door replaced with a heavier one, fitted with an automatic locking system that snapped shut as soon as it swung closed. He said the insurance would cover it, but still looked tired when he came to check on us. I filled out a police report while Jenna boxed up the untouched bread and deli meats to donate before they spoiled. Later that night, I called a taxi instead of taking the bus like usual. I sat in the back seat, staring out at the orange-lit sidewalks, but all I could see was that man's face again. Not even his face exactly, just his eyes, wild and furious, as if the world owed him something and I was the reason he wasn't getting it. A few days later, I made an appointment with a counselor through the university's mental health center. I didn't even know what I was supposed to say, but the woman there nodded calmly and told me it was a normal reaction to an abnormal event. Still, I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself fumbling with the phone, saw the glass shuddering under his fists. I kept thinking what would have happened if the alarm hadn't gone off, if the police had been even 2 minutes slower. Early in the morning, before my shift, I texted Jenna, "Check the door sensors every night, okay?" She wrote back immediately, "Don't worry, we're more valuable now than any old deal." Later, they told me the man would go to court, maybe just a fine, maybe probation. I didn't know and honestly didn't care by then. I only knew they needed me to show up and testify. I gathered every bit of evidence I could, security footage, the call log from 911, because I didn't want to trust my memory alone. Some of our regulars started messaging the store's page asking when we'd reopen. I joked back that it turns out, peace of mind costs more than a turkey sandwich. Most laughed. A few sent good wishes. It helped a little, knowing people noticed, even if they couldn't really understand. Even after we opened back up, I couldn't walk through the shop without glancing at the new lock, testing it twice. I thought a lot about how small things, a coupon, a misunderstanding, a little spark of anger, can grow into something heavy enough to break glass. Every night when I walked home, passing dark storefronts and flickering streetlights, I'd catch the flash of an alarm sensor reflecting back at me, a little wink of red or green. It felt like a goodnight wave, a shared promise between the empty shops and me. Stay safe. Sometimes in the distance, I'd hear another siren starting up, slicing through the night air. I'd pause, close my eyes for a second, and silently hope that wherever it was heading, it got there fast enough. And if anyone ever comes in asking about some old promotion we never had, I'll know exactly what to say. No discount is ever worth the price of fear after dark. The leash jerked hard in my hand as Nelson yanked toward the alley between the garages. It was 10:30 p.m., the usual time for our last walk. The streetlights were few and far between, and most of them gave off a sick, yellow glow. It had rained earlier, and the wet pavement reflected little bits of light here and there, but mostly it just looked black and empty. Nelson knew the shortcut home through the alley, so I let him pull me along. The smell of oil, wet concrete, and something sour filled the air. Trash cans were lined up against the garages, some knocked over, lids half open. As we moved deeper between the rows, I spotted him. A tall man standing completely still at the corner where two garage walls met. He wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat, and the way he stood, half hidden in the shadows, made it impossible to see his face. Only the shape of him, long and unmoving, was clear. I kept my head forward and pretended not to notice him. My heart started beating faster, but I didn't let it show in my steps. I just picked up the pace, making it look natural. Nelson gave a low grunt but kept walking with me, his nails clicking on the slick asphalt. I fumbled in my pocket for the house keys. They slipped in my hand and jingled loudly, the noise bouncing off the metal walls of the garages. It sounded stupidly loud, like throwing a bunch of spoons into a pot. Nelson turned his head over his shoulder and let out a low growl. I gave the leash a little tug to keep him moving, but that's when I heard it. Footsteps. Quick, hard steps, evenly spaced and getting louder behind us. I didn't dare look back. I just gripped the leash tighter, feeling the thin nylon bite into my fingers, and kept moving forward. The alley opened up ahead into the main street. It wasn't much better. Still dim, still quiet, but at least it was open. I heard the footsteps shift onto the wet pavement behind me. Sharper now, no mistake. Nelson was tense at the end of the leash, his body low and stiff, ears pinned back. My other hand slid into the pocket of my jacket where I kept the pepper spray. I wrapped my fingers around it and got my thumb ready over the little trigger. I didn't pull it out yet. I just walked faster, letting the leash out a bit so Nelson could move more freely. The man wasn't saying anything. No calls, no threats. Just walking, matching my speed, keeping the exact same distance between us. There was a street lamp ahead, the only one working in that stretch. It cast a small circle of pale light onto the slick ground. Every drop of water, every crack in the pavement, shone bright and hard in that little circle, while everything outside of it stayed deep black. The reflections twisted and jumped as we got closer, making it harder to tell what was solid and what was just a trick of the light. I needed to get somewhere less isolated. Across the street was a small courtyard with a rundown playground. Swings squeaked in the wind, and a few plastic toys were left out, wet and abandoned. At least there, the lights were a bit stronger from the apartment windows. I decided to cross. I tugged Nelson sharply and turned toward the courtyard. Without hesitation, the man turned too. He didn't hesitate for a second, like he knew exactly where I was planning to go. My heart thudded so loud I could hear it in my ears. Nelson barked once, short and sharp, then growled again, deeper this time. We crossed the street quickly. My boots slipped a little on the wet asphalt, but I caught myself. The man kept the same distance, neither closing in nor falling behind. I could hear the squelch of his shoes on the wet ground, slow and deliberate. In the courtyard, the lights from the windows above gave everything a weak, washed-out glow. The playground equipment was rusty, and the sandbox looked like it hadn't been touched in months. Nelson stiffened, his whole body pulling forward, the leash tight like a wire. He growled again, louder now, teeth bared. His body jerked sideways, pulling toward the man. I knew I couldn't let him get too far ahead. If something happened, I needed Nelson close. I stopped and yanked the leash back, holding it tight against my side. My fingers were numb around the pepper spray. I took a breath, tried to keep my voice even, and said, "Nelson Fass," pushing as much confidence into the words as I could. The man didn't flinch. He slowed down, his footsteps dragging just a little, then stopped altogether. The distance between us was maybe 10 meters, but it felt endless. Every second stretched out too long, the sound of my breathing too loud in my ears. I kept my thumb steady on the pepper spray, ready to use it if he moved even a step closer. My mind raced, trying to figure out what he wanted. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he wanted to ask for directions. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I looked quickly at the buildings around us. If I screamed, would someone hear me? The apartments weren't far, and a few windows had lights on. If I was loud enough, someone would notice. I just had to get close enough, just had to move. Nelson pulled at the leash again, his whole body tense, teeth bared. The carabiner on his collar creaked under the pressure. I tightened my grip on it, feeling it bite into my palm. That's when the man did something strange. He lifted his hand slowly, palm facing me, like he was surrendering. No words, no sudden movements. Then he turned away, without any hurry, and walked off toward a side alley. He didn't look back once. His steps were calm, even, like he had all the time in the world. I didn't wait to see where he was going. I yanked Nelson's leash and sprinted for the nearest entrance to an apartment block. My shoes slipped a little on the wet ground, but I kept going, fumbling for the intercom. I didn't waste time picking a number. I just jammed my finger onto every button, one after another, hoping someone would answer. A crackle came from the speaker, and a buzz sounded as the door clicked open. I pulled it wide and dragged Nelson inside. A woman's voice came through the speaker, but I could barely make out what she said. I leaned into the microphone and said the only word that mattered: followed. 20 minutes later, the local officer showed up. He was a short guy, thick jacket, serious face. We went out to the courtyard, flashlights cutting through the dark. Nelson stayed close, ears alert. We found some sneaker prints in the muddy patches near the alley, but after a few meters, they got lost in the slush and gravel. The officer checked the corners, shone his light around, but the place was quiet again, empty. He pointed to the cameras on the building walls, small, cheap models barely hanging onto their mounts. "These don't work," he said. "Bunch of break-ins a while ago and nobody fixed them." He told me they were looking for someone in the area. There had been a couple of attacks recently. Same pattern. Late evening, quiet places, lone people. I filed a report with him, giving every detail I remembered. The man's height, the coat, the hat. The way he stayed silent, the way he seemed to know where I was going. That night, Nelson got a double handful of treats. He ate them quickly, tail wagging, tongue lolling out, like nothing bad had ever happened. I ordered a small emergency alarm online right after. A little thing you could clip to your belt, with a siren loud enough to wake the whole block. From then on, we stuck to the main streets. Well-lit, busy, earlier walks, never past 10. It felt stupid sometimes, crossing a street just because a corner looked too dark, but better to feel stupid than not make it home. Some of the neighbors started talking about putting up a new street lamp in the alley too. Everyone had heard my story by then. It made them realize it could happen to anyone. About a week later, I got a call from the officer. They caught someone. He said the suspect showed up on a supermarket camera a few neighborhoods over. Same coat, same hat. Still, they weren't closing the case yet. They needed more to be sure, needed to link him directly to the attacks. I hung up the phone and sat there for a while, just listening to the quiet hum of the heater and the soft snore of Nelson curled up at my feet. I thought about that night a lot, about how close it came to being worse. I kept thinking, what if I hadn't had Nelson with me? What if I'd stopped to tie my shoe? What if I'd hesitated when the man turned away? Since then, the building's residents made a habit of walking their dogs together. No more solo walks late at night. Small groups, talking quietly, flashlights bobbing. Nelson got used to the attention. More belly rubs, more treats slipped from strangers. He loved it. But I didn't let myself forget why we were doing it. It wasn't for the fun of it. It was to stay alive. Even now, when the wind rattles the metal doors of the garages at night, I can feel my hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray. A noise like that, sudden and sharp, makes everything from that night flash back for a second. Maybe that man would never walk free again. Maybe he would. Didn't matter. His shadow, the shape of his coat against the alley wall, stayed with me. It made its home in the back of my mind. And every time I passed that corner where he first stood, still and waiting, I squeeze the leash a little tighter and whisper a silent thanks to Nelson for knowing before I did exactly where the silence ended. The reception area felt like a tomb after midnight. The neon vacancy sign outside buzzed loud enough that I could almost hear each flicker. I was half dozing behind the counter when the front door creaked open and a man stepped inside. His jacket was soaked through, leaving dark patches across the fabric, and his eyes darted around the lobby like he was searching for exits. He came up to the desk, barely making eye contact, and asked for a room. Just until morning, said he'd settle the bill when he checked out. I shook my head, pointing to the laminated sign taped right in front of him. Payment in advance, no exceptions. I kept my voice polite but firm, explaining it was company policy, not personal. He tensed, jaw working like he was chewing on the words. For a second, I thought he might leave. Instead, he turned sharp, slipping past the counter before I could even move, heading straight for the stairwell leading down to the storage levels. The heavy door marked authorized personnel, only had a simple old-fashioned lock, no keycard, no alarm. I jumped up and hit the panic button under the counter with my knee, then grabbed the desk phone to buzz Jordan, my co-worker on the night shift. "We got a runner," I said, heading down to the storage. Jordan met me by the stairwell in under a minute, his shirt half untucked and a flashlight in hand. We crept down, the concrete steps amplifying every noise, even the scuff of our sneakers. Somewhere ahead, deeper in the corridors, we could hear the faint slap of hurried footsteps bouncing off the cement walls. "Should wait for the cops," Jordan whispered, hand hovering over his phone. I nodded and pulled out mine too, quickly dialing 911. I kept my voice low but clear, giving the operator the address, the layout, and what little description I had of the guy. Mid-30s, wet jacket, acting jumpy. "Stay on the line," she said. "Officers en route." We edged further down the corridor, the lights overhead buzzing and casting long, jerky shadows. The place felt endless at night, just rows of doors leading into linen storage, boiler rooms, supply closets. The air was thick and warm from the laundry dryers, with a sharp chemical tang that made my nose itch. Every step we took made my heart thump louder, half expecting him to jump out from behind a door. Down one passage we heard it, a rough scrape, like someone pushing a heavy cart or bin across the concrete. Jordan flicked his flashlight toward the noise, beam catching on stainless steel. One of the big rolling laundry baskets half-tilted near a supply door. I read the door numbers out loud, making sure the dispatcher had our location pinned. Basement level B, corridor 4, door 317, I muttered. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Jordan swung the light back and forth while I kept close to the wall, knees slightly bent, ready to duck or bolt if the guy charged us. The dispatcher kept talking in my ear, saying units were 3 minutes away. That didn't feel soon enough. If the guy found the back staircase, he could hit the kitchen, maybe even circle back into the lobby. We kept moving, slow and steady, but every clink and clatter from deeper in the building made my hands sweat. Then we heard the crash, metal on tile, and a string of ceramic shattering. Dishes, somewhere past the boilers, the kitchen. Jordan didn't even have to say anything. We both turned and started moving backward, retracing our steps fast but careful not to make noise. We reached a heavy service gate, a metal grid door normally used to section off parts of the basement during maintenance. Jordan wrestled the sliding bolt into place and slammed the latch down. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might slow him down for a few minutes. We needed those minutes bad. The dispatcher was telling me officers were entering from the back lot, taking the kitchen entrance. I pressed myself against the cold concrete wall, listening to the growing chaos echoing from the far end of the corridor. The first officers came in through the black entrance door by the kitchen, guns low but ready, scanning the corridors with sharp, quick moves. 2 of them peeled off toward the laundry hallway, the other 2 toward the main stairwell. Jordan and I stayed behind, pointing down the hall where we'd heard the last crash. The police moved fast, silent except for the soft squawk of their radios. We kept back by the locked grid gate, listening as their footsteps faded into the maze of the basement. For a few minutes, it was just the buzz of old fluorescent lights and the steady beep of my call still live with dispatch. Then a crackle on the radio. Suspect located. Section 3B, behind the towel stacks. Jordan exhaled hard through his nose but stayed silent. We waited where we were as 2 officers came back into view, leading the man between them. He wasn't fighting. His wet jacket clung to him, and his knees buckled a little like he might fall over. In one hand, dangling loosely, was a long kitchen knife with a black plastic handle. The blade looked scratched and dirty under the flashlight beams. He kept muttering, voice low but clear enough to catch. Just needed a place. Just a bed. Not looking for trouble. One of the officers patted him down. His pockets were stuffed, not with cash or stolen phones, but with thin metal picks, tension wrenches, the kind of kit you don't carry unless you plan on breaking into something. A policewoman with a clipboard started taking our statements right there by the door to the boiler room. Jordan handed over the master keys so they could check every closet, every storage room. I kept my eyes on the floor, where small puddles of water from the man's jacket left a faint trail across the concrete. Later, the officers found the broken entry point, a corner of the backyard fence that had been sagging for months, the chain link torn open just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. We'd flagged it to management before, but it was always next quarter's budget. Behind the boiler room, in a black trash bag shoved into a gap between 2 pipes, they pulled out wallets, 6 of them. Guest wallets, IDs, cash, even a few credit cards, all still inside. Looked like he'd been moving quiet for a while before we caught him. Jordan and I stayed until almost sunrise, filling out report after report, explaining every detail from the first step he took into the lobby. My handwriting started slanting worse the longer I sat at the folding table they brought down for paperwork. The manager came in early, face tight, and said we'd be installing more cameras in every basement corridor by the end of the week. After they cleared the scene, I went to check the terrace security feed. It wasn't hard to find him. The shaky figure climbing the fence, getting his jacket caught, falling flat into the gravel, scrambling up again. Watching it made my stomach knot. He didn't look angry. He looked desperate, like a man with nowhere left to go. Still, a knife doesn't care what you're feeling when you swing it. By morning, the lobby was back to normal. Fresh coffee brewed in the corner, and guests wandered down in sweatpants and slippers, filling their plates with scrambled eggs and toast. No one had a clue that 2 floors beneath them, officers had been chasing a man with a blade through the guts of the building. I stood behind the counter, watching sunlight glint off the orange juice jugs lined up on the breakfast buffet. The glass sparkled clean and bright, like nothing bad had ever touched this place. I kept smiling at the guests, answering questions about checkout times, but in the back of my mind, all I could see was that black grid door slamming shut and the shadows behind it. We replaced every lock in the building that week, welded the fence, added a motion sensor to the basement corridor, the kind that would trip a silent alarm straight to the night desk. Management wanted no more surprises. A few days later, the lead officer sent over a short letter, thanking us for staying calm, following protocol. Jordan taped it up next to the time clock in the back office. For once, he joked, somebody noticed we didn't screw up. Sometimes guests still ask why there's a new camera pointing down the old laundry hall. I just smile and say, we like to know who's staying with us. And if anyone tries sneaking into the basement again, they won't stay invisible for long. I had been waiting for the new football game for months. It finally arrived, and I picked up the box from a store inside the trading mall. The package felt heavy in my hands, wrapped in shiny plastic, the cover showing players mid-strike, names of new game modes listed down the side. I didn't want to rush home yet. I sat down on a wooden bench just outside the pavilion, tilting the box under the patchy sunlight, reading the small letters on the back. Kids and families walked past, their footsteps bouncing off the tiled floor. Music from a nearby shoe store drifted in and out. While I was tracing the different features with my finger, a man walked up. His coat was torn at the sleeves, grimy around the cuffs. A snake tattoo curled up the side of his neck, black and faded. His smile stretched too wide, showing yellowed teeth. He asked how old I was, then if I liked sports, leaning in closer than he needed to. His voice had a weird roughness to it, like someone who smoked too much. I shifted on the bench, clutching the game tighter, and told him my older brother was waiting for me. He nodded, but didn't leave. Instead, he sat down right next to me. The smell of old tobacco and cheap coffee hit me so hard I had to breathe through my mouth. I turned my shoulders away a little, but he acted like he didn't notice. He said he knew a place nearby where you could play consoles for free, no payment needed. Just around the corner, he added, tapping the air with 2 fingers like it was some casual offer. My gut twisted. I focused hard on looking bored, like I wasn't paying him much attention. I gripped the plastic bag tighter and stood up quickly, saying that I was already late. He stood up too, way too fast, like he didn't want to give me a chance to walk off alone. It's just a short tour, he said, still smiling, pointing vaguely behind him. I shook my head, saying again that my brother would be here any second. To make it look real, I pulled my phone out of my jacket pocket, turning the black screen toward him like proof. His eyes flicked from the phone to the wide, empty hallway stretching out behind me. Most of the shops were closed this early. His smile shifted into a kind of smirk. He made a small sound in his throat, like a chuckle. I could feel the sweat starting to form at my hairline. Without thinking any more, I bolted. I ran straight toward a little photo studio about 20 meters away. Its sign was glowing a strong, bright white, way brighter than anything else around. My shoes slapped against the floor hard. I didn't even glance back until I was halfway there, but I could hear the heavy shuffle of him moving behind me, fast, His shadow stretched across the corridor. He was bigger than me, his shoulders blocking half the hallway. The muscles in my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. I leaned forward, arms pumping, the bag with the game swinging wildly at my side. The buzzing fluorescent lights overhead blurred into long white lines. My foot caught a loose piece of tile, but I stayed upright, heart hammering against my ribs. I smashed into the door of the photo salon and nearly slipped inside. The girl behind the counter looked up, startled. I slammed my hands down on the desk and yelled, "Call security!" The photographer didn't waste a second. He slammed his hand onto a red button under the desk, and the whole corridor exploded with a piercing siren. The sound bounced off the glass storefronts and the empty floor, loud enough to make my ears ring. The man in the torn coat froze by the display window, like he was deciding if this was serious or just a bluff. For a moment, he just stood there, scratching the back of his neck where the snake tattoo twisted under his collar. After about a minute that felt way longer, 2 security guards showed up from opposite ends of the gallery. They walked quickly, hands resting near their belts. The man straightened up and raised his arms a little, saying loudly that I was his friend, that he just wanted to help me. He tried to say my name but stumbled, mumbling something that didn't even start with the right letter. The guards didn't look convinced. One of them kept talking to him in a low, firm voice, while the other stayed close to me. They told him to wait for the police to clear everything. He laughed a little, shook his head like it was all some mistake, then turned fast like he was going to leave. Both guards reacted at once. One grabbed his sleeve, the other stepped between him and the escalator. There was a short struggle, more confusion than violence, but they got him pinned against the railing. I crouched behind the counter, only peeking over the top. My heart hammered so hard I thought they could hear it over the siren. My palms trembled against the cool surface of the desk. When the police finally arrived, they checked the security cameras. On the screen, it was clear. The man had been walking slow laps through the mall, glancing into stores, hanging around benches, focusing only on teenagers who seemed alone. At the station, everything came out. The man wasn't just a creep. He was already wanted for assaults in another district. His face, his tattoo, even the ripped coat matched reports from other incidents. The photo studio's cameras had caught a perfect shot of the snake tattoo when he had leaned close to the window. That single clear image sealed it. They called my parents. I didn't say much while waiting. My hands stayed locked around the strap of my backpack. When they arrived, they rushed in like a wave. Mom hugged me so hard it hurt, and Dad kept a hand on my shoulder the whole walk back to the car. A police officer, younger guy with short hair, leaned down before we left and said, "Next time, stick with friends when you go shopping, all right?" At home, I unwrapped the game, registered it online, but something had changed. Every time the loading screen showed a park bench or empty street in the background, my mind flashed back to that bench at the mall. Same tile floors, same feeling of eyes watching too long. Later that week, our school invited a police officer to give a talk about safety. It wasn't just me. During the questions, a lot of kids admitted that adults had tried weird conversations with them too. Offers of free stuff, shortcuts to places. One girl said a guy offered her free earphones if she just followed him behind the station. After that, we started going to the mall in groups. Even just 3 or 4 together made a big difference. We joked around, called ourselves the shopping squad. But every joke had that thin, serious line underneath it. One guy even pointed to the security cameras now and said, "That's our MVP right there." Sometimes I still swing by that trading mall, mostly for comic books. I walk past the same places, the same benches, but I never sit down anymore. Cameras are everywhere now. Big round lenses tucked into the corners, tiny red lights blinking. It's like the whole building grew eyes. The head security guard recognizes me now. He usually gives a small nod and a wink when I walk past. Right near the photo studio, There's a poster taped up. Bold letters say, "Report suspicious behavior immediately." I touch the strap of my bag tighter every time I see it. The football game box sits on my shelf at home. I never moved it into the stack with the others. It's not just a game anymore. It feels like proof that quick thinking, just one fast decision, can change everything. I keep thinking about it. About how it's not really about the game surviving that day. It's about someone else never having to meet that guy later because he got caught. That feels heavier than anything. My older brother actually ended up getting a job at that same mall, fixing computers and checking the security system every week. He jokes that he's keeping an eye on things for me. I know he's half serious. And every time I hear the beep when an employee badge scans at a door, every time a new camera goes up and catches that soft red light blinking, I remember what it felt like. Hitting my own mental start button, getting out fast, getting help. Some levels in life, you don't win by getting the high score. You win by hitting the right button at the exact right time. The cold hit my face like a slap when I stepped outside. It was one of those thick, heavy winter days when the whole town seemed muffled under a sky the color of dirty wool. I was staying with my aunt for the winter holidays. She lived in a small town, the kind with one main street, a couple of shops, and a river that steamed like a giant kettle when the air turned bitter. That morning, after breakfast, we bundled up and went to the frozen pond near the edge of town. The ice was thick enough to hold us, and we were laughing, throwing chunks of snow at each other, our boots sliding and crunching. The pond stretched wide and flat, a blank white sheet where our footprints looked like scribbles. A few other kids from the neighborhood were there too, stomping out trails and dragging old hockey sticks around. We were just starting to build a big snow mound when we heard the engine. It crackled and coughed, too loud for the quiet, and made all of us look up. A white SUV crawled toward the pond's edge, its tires grinding against the packed snow. Steam hissed out from under the hood, mixing with the river mist. The car stopped, and for a second, none of us moved. Then the driver's door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He wore a thick black jacket and a dark beanie pulled low over his forehead. He squinted against the glare off the ice. Without any hesitation, he called out my name, clear and sharp across the frozen pond. I froze, the half-made snowball slipping from my mittens. He took a step closer, boots crunching. "Your dad sent me to get you," he said, voice rough but casual, like he was picking someone up from school. "There's a storm coming. Better get home before it hits." I glanced sideways at my friends. They weren't moving either, but I could feel the tension knotting in the air. My dad worked hours away, in a different city, and barely managed a phone call once a week. He sure wasn't sending anyone to pick me up without telling my aunt first. The man waved a hand, trying to seem relaxed, and swung open the passenger door. I saw inside, a mess of heavy-duty stuff, ropes, chains, some kind of tarp bundled on the seat. Not the kind of back seat you hop into without thinking. I met my friend's eyes. We didn't need to say anything. Without a word, we dropped everything and ran. Boots hammering the ice, slipping and sliding, arms pumping. Behind us, I heard the car doors slam and the tires spin as he threw the SUV into motion. The noise of the engine grew louder, the screech of the tires sharper. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack the ice under my feet. The ice was slick and pitted, and we almost fell more than once, but somehow we kept going. The houses lining the riverbank looked far away, but every step took us closer. The sound of the car chased us, a weird whine of acceleration, the crunch of tires losing grip. We hit the edge of the pond and kept running up through the backyards, our breath coming in clouds, our boots dragging through the snow. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see how close he was. When we finally stumbled up the porch steps, I yanked open the door without knocking and burst inside, gasping. My aunt was in the kitchen, turning toward us with a surprised look that vanished the second she saw our faces. I blurted everything out, barely pausing for breath. She grabbed the phone and called the police immediately. A patrol car rolled up not long after, blue and red lights spinning lazily across the snow. 2 officers stepped out, faces tight and serious. They asked questions, writing everything down. What color was the car? White, kind of dirty around the tires. What did the man look like? Tall, broad, dark clothes, black beanie. I kept replaying his voice in my head, trying to remember every detail. The police said they'd sweep the area. We stood by the window, peeking out from behind the curtains as they drove around. But the snow was coming down heavier now, fine and fast, covering up the tire tracks almost as soon as they formed. They didn't find anything. No car, no footprints, no sign he'd ever been there. That night, an officer came back to take a longer statement. He was the one who told us that they'd had a few similar reports from nearby towns recently. Always a white SUV. Always a man acting like he was sent by a parent. Always targeting kids near isolated areas. After that, my aunt didn't let us out of her sight. Every day, she met us at the front steps if we went anywhere at all, bundled up and sharp-eyed. The other kids' parents did the same. It was like the whole town shifted a little, got a little tighter, a little more careful. A few days later, my dad finally got a break from work and called. My aunt told him everything. He stayed on the phone with me for a long time, telling me not to be scared, that he'd come visit as soon as he could. I didn't say much back. I just listened to his voice and nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Slowly, we adjusted. We learned to stay in groups, to keep closer to home. But the pond kept calling, blank and open and tempting. Some afternoons we still slipped out there, kicking at the crusty snow, building forts out of broken ice sheets, staying where we could see the rooftops. It started to feel like maybe the worst had passed. Like the cold would finally break, the snow would melt, and this whole thing would disappear with the winter. The years slipped by faster than I realized. Winter came again, and I found myself back at my aunt's place for the holidays, just like before. Same river smoking into the frozen air, same sagging rooftops dusted in snow. I had grown taller, my jacket from last year tight across the shoulders, but that didn't stop me from bundling up and heading out with my old friends. We kicked through the drifts, laughing, pegging each other with snowballs, feeling a little more reckless, but not quite fearless. One afternoon, the sun dipping low and sharp across the snow, we were messing around near the riverbank again. The air was brittle and still, and every crunch of our boots echoed off the ice. That's when we heard it. A low rumble, not from the street, but from the hill that sloped up behind the town. We turned as one, squinting into the brightness. A white SUV was crawling over the rise, its shape unmistakable even from a distance. It rolled to a slow stop halfway down, tires sinking a little into the snow. But the driver didn't get out this time. We stood there, not moving, not talking. The windows were dark, almost blacked out, and from where we stood, the inside of the car looked empty. No movement, no sign of anyone inside. Just that humming engine, and the way the exhaust made little clouds that floated and vanished. We stared so long it almost felt normal again, like maybe we were imagining it. But then, with a soft click barely audible across the snow, the passenger side door cracked open. A hand, pale, gloved, shoved something out onto the snow. A plastic bag tumbled down, caught the edge of a drift, and stuck there like a torn flag. Before any of us could move, the door slammed shut. The engine revved, and the SUV skidded backward in a wide arc, spraying snow from its wheels, then disappeared back over the hill like it had only come to make sure we were still here. None of us moved for a long second. It was Marco who finally whispered, "What the hell?" We approached the bag carefully, stepping wide. The plastic was thin and white, crinkling in the breeze. I grabbed a long stick from the ground and poked it, lifting it slightly. Inside, we could see candy, bright wrapped chocolate bars, and something else, softer, colorful. Children's gloves, tiny ones, striped in cheerful reds and blues. No one touched it with bare hands. We dragged it back to the house with the stick, half running, our boots sliding and scraping across the icy paths. My aunt met us at the door, saw our faces, and didn't even ask questions. She bundled the bag into another clean trash bag without opening it and drove straight to the police station. The officers recognized us right away. They asked all the same questions, took the bag carefully, logged it into evidence. They promised again to send more patrols through the neighborhood. Promised to keep an eye out. Promised a lot. This time, it wasn't just me telling a story. All my friends had seen it too, clear as day. Nobody laughed it off anymore. The threat was real, and it wasn't just about a strange man on a pond anymore. It was wider, more patient. The school held a special assembly about safety. One of the local cops stood up front, hat in his hands, and talked about staying in groups, about telling an adult if you saw anything weird, about never, ever getting close to a strange car. The whole room sat in absolute silence, no shuffling, no whispering. Not even the troublemakers in the back moved. After that, I stopped going to the pond unless my aunt or one of the neighbors came along. It killed me to stay away. The snow was fresh and crisp, calling out for games, for forts, for sliding across the frozen crust. But we stayed close to home, crowding into shoveled yards and school parking lots where someone was always watching. Even there, the world felt thinner. The snow didn't feel soft anymore. It felt like a lid pressed down over everything. Every car that rolled down the street made us all stiffen a little, glance at each other, waiting. The town felt smaller, edged in by something we couldn't quite name but all recognized now. Then spring came. The snow melted away in soggy clumps, the river broke open with dirty ice, and the brown grass peeked through the slush. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when my aunt walked in from the mailbox, her face pinched tight. She didn't say anything, just slid an envelope across the table toward me. No return address. Inside was a postcard. A photograph of the pond, taken from the same angle where we usually built our snow forts. The trees were bare, the ice gray and streaked with old tracks. On the back, in a looping hand, just 4 words. White will return soon. My aunt called the police immediately. They came and took the postcard, handled it with gloves, scanned it for fingerprints. Nothing. Completely clean. They logged it as evidence, took statements, promised again to look harder, watch more closely. But even I knew it wouldn't lead anywhere. I asked to keep a copy. It's still tucked in a folder in the bottom of my drawer, under old notebooks and broken pencils. Some nights I pull it out and look at it. Try to understand if it's a threat, a warning, or just a game. When I line it all up in my mind, the frozen pond, the creeping SUV, the scattered candies, the anonymous postcard, it feels like someone drawing circles around me. Tighter and tighter. I'm getting older, taller, stronger. But the memory of that driver doesn't fade. It just settles deeper into me, sharper at the edges. This summer, the pond will melt into a shivering haze. Kids will race their bikes around it again. Parents will sip coffee on back porches. It will all look normal, maybe even safe. But I know better. When the first winter storm rolls in next year, when the first snow flies and the world turns white again, we won't go back to the pond. We'll stay close, within sight of the windows, under the hard yellow light of the porch lamps. We'll stay inside the circle until someday, somehow, we break it for good.